Chapter 852. At the age of 22, Varian was at his most hot-blooded. He longed to make a name for himself, and to one day become a hero on par with Uncle Anduin, whom he admired the most. It wasn't that he didn't like Duque, but that Duque was a mage after all, and they weren't on the same path. Anduin's words were a good wake-up call for Varian. He humbly lowered his head and bowed to Anduin. At this moment, Kalia, who had been silent all this while, spoke. Even though she had matured a lot, she still had the unique voice of a young girl. Duque, is there anything else that Rotterdam can do for the Alliance? Duque tapped the table lightly with his left index finger. If the unrecognizable course of history hadn't changed, then in less than 3 months, once Archimonde knelt down, the power that the Burning Legion transmitted to Azeroth would immediately weaken. By then, Lich King Zul would lose half of his strength. Logically speaking, waiting until then to counterattack was the most ideal. But doing so was a little too passive. First of all, this was on the premise that Archimonde had to kneel. If Archimonde was too powerful in this life, and really destroyed Mount Hyjal, settled the Well of Eternity, and destroyed the World Tree, that would really be the end of everyone. Secondly, the Alliance had preserved more vitality than in history. At least 2/3 of Rotterdam's elite army was preserved, which gave the Alliance more confidence. There would no longer be the Scarlet Crusade, which was cursed like a dog, and the slightly bitter Silver Dawn, which was praised by tens of thousands of people. Moreover, Kalia had become the queen. It would be too much of a waste if she was simply placed in the palace as a mascot. Just as Duque was thinking about it, he suddenly received a new message. It was a magical image sent by a mage apprentice who had sacrificed himself. In the image, Archimonde's huge body swept across the fragile Rotterdam continent all the way to the west. In the lands invaded by the Calamity Army, only all living things died, and everything withered. At least the land was still the land, and the forest was still the forest. The places that Archimonde passed through were all easily burned by the flames that flowed out of his body. The ground was sinking, and everything that could be burned was turned into ashes. Perhaps this was why they were called the Burning Legion and not the Devil Legion. In his heart, Duque cursed fiercely, "Damn it, since this guy can teleport here, why can't he teleport directly to Kalimdor?" Although he was cursing, Duque still asked the officer who had sent the message in detail. The news he got was that Archimonde had already gone to the vicinity of Orson Farm in the Silver Pine Forest in the west of the Lordaeron continent. It is estimated that the gigantic demon will arrive at the South Stream coast by late tomorrow, the messenger reported. Duque pondered for a moment and gave his first order. Tell Dallin to clear the sea route. Don't come into contact with the Arch-Herons. Turning his head, Duque looked at Queen Kalia, who looked hopeful and eager for a quest. Please inform Mograine. Have Abendis and Turalian push the front lines back to the Sodero River, then have Dathrahan and Mograine personally lead the attack on Caer Darrow. Caer Darren? Elucia trembled. She could never forget that place. After all, she had lived in Caer Darren for her entire childhood. Unfortunately, Elucia, that place has become the biggest base for the Church of the Damned. The Scourge Army calls it Scholomance. The Dark Dean, Jaden, has been continuously training dark acolytes and necromancers there. Destroying that place is equivalent to cutting off an important source of manpower for the Scourge Army. Anduin snapped his fingers. He seemed a little happy. Not a bad idea. Also, that place is near the front lines. But don't they have 2 Breaking Dawn Great Liches? Shouldn't we? Duque shook his head. You don't know those 2 Great Liches well enough. Anastrian isn't the kind of guy who is willing to follow orders and be a dog. Cal Thuzad doesn't like to fight head-on. Before all his subordinates die, he won't fight. But just in case, I can ask Krasis to help attack Caer Darren. If anything happens, he can still hold on until I teleport over. Kalia smiled. Then I have no problem. What about us? William was a little excited. Call Magni. We'll go to the Dalajan and have an armed patrol. William immediately became dispirited. He wasn't lacking in intelligence. He immediately understood what this meant. Archimonde had roared in the Dalagen and turned the Dalagen into ruins. It was conceivable that Arthas would evacuate the Dalagen. Now that the Scourge army was powerful, attacking Rotterdam would provoke Arthas to retaliate fiercely. Any commander with a clear mind would know that it was impossible to take down the Scourge army in one go. The best way was to plan slowly. Hence, attacking the Dalagen was more of a political gesture. Just like a few days ago, Lothar had recovered the Earthy Highlands and Rapidwater Castle, which had almost no organized undead army. On the surface, it was said that they had recovered a lot of territory, but in reality, it was just a piece of empty land. Except for the most determined people in Rapidwater Castle, no one would be willing to continue to stay there. In fact, in the past week, more than 100,000 Gilnis and Storm Guardians had responded to Jaina's call and boarded the ship or were preparing to board the ship to go to the paradise in their hearts, Theramore, which was on the other side of the endless ocean. After a long discussion, they finally decided on the missions of each legion. After the meeting, Lothar found Duque in private, and told him a piece of news that wasn't surprising to Duque. "If we have to go to battle against Archimonde this time, I won't be able to go. I plan to give, Quell, Zarum, to Turayan." "Anduin, your body," Lothar smiled bitterly. "I got injured when I was young. I only realized that it was terrible after I was 60 years old. My bones and muscles hurt all the time." Lothar took off his coat and pointed at the various scars on his body. Duque noticed that several of the scars were left from the battle with Orgrim. Thinking about how Lothar had once again led the army to battle despite his illness, Duque couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. Then, as a warrior, dying on the battlefield is the best ending. However, if I want to weaken the hope of the Alliance and all the intelligent species in the world to win, then I'd rather give up my divine sword and let the stronger younger generation gamble on the future of humanity. I've already decided on this matter, don't try to persuade me. You should know Turayan well. He's a good guy. Indeed. I'll leave it to you this time. I hope you can have good news. If you fail, don't worry, I'll be there. Even if I have to carry a broken sword, I'll go and fight Archimonde." Lothar was clearly saying those words in a relaxed manner, but Duque could deeply feel that Lothar was full of helplessness and sensed that he was past his prime. Duque, chest tightened. Not only did he feel respect for Lothar, but he also felt extremely regretful. Veterans don't die, they just wither. Chapter 853. There was hesitation, and the thought of retreating. Compared to a true hero like Lothar, Duque felt ashamed. His title as a legendary hero was more like a blasphemy to the word hero. It had nothing to do with past achievements, but purely the difference in ideology. Duque summoned his courage and said, "Yes, Anduin, actually, you might also know that the longevity of the High Elves and their original ancestors, the Night Elves, actually comes from the blessings of the dragons. To be precise, it comes from the blessings of Nosdorm." Lothar narrowed his eyes, seemingly having already guessed what Duque was going to say. Before Duque could say it, he waved his hand gently to stop Duque. Perhaps living beings will instinctively pursue the so-called longevity, immortality, and even eternal life. However, I don't think that too long of a time is a good thing for a living being. Look at the High Elves. Even if they don't have an infinite lifespan, what have they done in the past thousands of years? They have fallen and corrupted because of emptiness, and imprisoned the thoughts of themselves and their compatriots because of their lack of progress. In the past 7,000 years, has the entire Kuel Salis kingdom ever improved at all? Lothar's words made sense, and Duque was speechless. It is precisely because of the shortness of human life that we cherish it. Humans will seize the most glorious years of their lives to invent, create, and do all kinds of valuable things. Look, when I was young, the entire world only knew about swords and magic. Lothar then pointed his finger at Duque's eyebrows. However, the hot weapons and steam civilization that you promoted have overturned the lives of the people of Stormwind in the past 13 years. If it weren't for the existence of transcendent professionals, and if it weren't for the fact that cannons couldn't destroy the undying and demons, there would be no need for longswords and holy light to exist at all. Think about it, isn't this a miracle created by humans? Duque's breathing quickened all of a sudden. He waited, eager to hear Lothar's last words. Indeed, Anjouan Lothar, the name with a sacred meaning, and the greatest words left by the greatest man of this era, did not disappoint Duque. That is to say, life is great because it's short, life is glorious because it's limited. Duque was shocked to the point of being unable to control himself, as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. Duque suddenly understood why Lothar would choose not to marry and would rather let the noble and great earthy bloodline end in his generation. Noxus believed that there was no need for Thoradin the Great's bloodline to continue existing after a more inclusive and greater alliance. Suddenly, he felt like crying. But he couldn't cry. Lothar left, leaving Duque alone in the wind, gazing into the distance. As the night deepened, Elucia came to Duque's side. It's getting late. Get some rest. If the soldiers below see you in such a melancholic state, they will start to doubt their future. Yes. In the past 10 years, in order to avoid agitating the Rotterdam kingdom, the Barov family had never sent any of their members to take up important positions in South Sea Castle. However, as the former lord of South Sea Town, the Barov family's influence was everywhere, and they were the de facto masters of South Sea city-state. Hence, the Barov family owned an independent villa on the hill to the west of South Sea Castle. Following Elucia to the so-called resting place, Duque was stunned to discover that the style of the villa was completely modeled after the villa on the side of the Wind Lake that he often stayed in. It was not just the exterior, but even the things inside were arranged exactly the same, except for those that were too precious to be replicated. The master bedroom was arranged according to Duque's bedroom in Karazhan. Clearly, that was not something that could be done overnight. More importantly, many of the things in the villa were obviously Windrunner's style, which was left behind by the two female owners of the Wind Lake Villa. In fact, she had even discovered and imitated many small details. If Elucia was a jealous or narrow-minded woman, she would never do such a thing. What was effort? That was effort. Duque suddenly sighed. Elucia was too good to him. In the 10 years that he had been missing, Elucia had supported the entire Marcus family without complaint or regret, ensuring that his policies and plans could continue to be implemented, and even providing for all the expenses that his so-called fiancée, Gianna, had. When he had just returned, when his magic circuit was in a mess, she did not hesitate to split her soul and offer up her magic circuit to help him through the difficult times. When he rushed to the Dalajan to besiege Arthas for the first time, Elucia endured the pain in her soul and rushed back to Stormwind City to organize the logistics of the army. This young lady of the Barov family, who had almost been completely ruined, had silently shouldered so much with her feminine body and weak shoulders. However, she had never been jealous of Aurelia and Sasha. She put herself in a low position and did all this silently. Elucia? Elucia, who had been tugging at the hem of her skirt nervously, not knowing if Duque liked her, was stunned for a moment before coming back to her senses. While I'm back, I'll first fix your magic circuit. No, Your battle is imminent, you need more, obviously. Elucia had misunderstood. Duque did not say anything, but only deeply pressed his lips on hers. The woman's uneasy heart suddenly calmed down. Duque smiled. Don't you think that if you get your magic circuit back, it will be more convenient for you to open the portal to find me? Elucia's face instantly turned red. From her cheeks to her neck, to her collarbone, to her half-exposed peaks, she was all bright red. Actually, I didn't mean to drag you down today. But when I think that I haven't really had you, and that I might lose you soon, I suddenly feel very scared. Duque breathed into Elucia's sensitive ear. Today, in addition to fixing your magic circuit, I will also help teach you alchemy. Alchemy? When did Duque learn this thing? Or did Duque learn it in the past 10 years in Karazhan? Duque added in a low voice, it's the most mysterious human alchemy in the world. What? The human body was very mysterious. It consisted of 45% to 75% water, about 8% blood, 35% to 40% bones, and a certain amount of protein, fat, and muscle. The specific method was to first purify the parent body, usually just washing it clean, and then draw a magic circle with your finger. Usually, you would focus on the important parts, and wait for the parent body to warm up. The last step was the most important step, pulling out the long sword needed to summon life, stabbing it into the center of the magic circle, repeatedly stabbing straight, stabbing left and right, and stabbing back until the blade burst with the light of life. There was a chance to complete human alchemy in 10 months. Chapter 854. The moonlight was bright, and the beauty was as beautiful as water. As if afraid that her beloved pillow would run away, Alicia hugged Duque tightly and refused to let go. The beauty was exhausted. Duque had been holding back for too long and had gone overboard on a whim, tormenting her greatly. However, Alicia was like a moth flying into a flame, fearless of her own safety, and welcomed him with all her might. When Duque came back to his senses, he realized that this was a combo that Aurelia and Raisa together might not be able to withstand. Would there be any deaths? Would it kill someone? The above two sentences should be understood from two different perspectives. Chinese is a wonderful language. Sensing that Duque moved, Alicia trembled like a frightened rabbit. She struggled to open her tired eyes and said almost subconsciously, Duque, don't go. Duque was speechless. He gently stroked Alicia's head and said softly, I won't go, I won't go. Only then did Alicia wake up. She raised her head, and there were still faint traces of tears in the corner of her eyes. Duque suddenly felt heartache and wiped away her tears with the softest of movements. I'm sorry, I hurt you. The black-haired beauty made a mellow nasal sound, and then smiled softly. This pain is really nothing compared to the 13 years of waiting and mental torture. It's a pity that I can't give you my most beautiful 10 years. Women were like flowers, and Alicia's most dazzling and blooming age had just passed. Using her finger to gently draw meaningless symbols on Duque's trained abs, Alicia said faintly, I'm not a jealous woman. As long as you can occasionally come and pamper me, I'm willing to die. Sigh. Where else could he find such a good woman? For a moment, Duque felt that starting a harem was a very immoral act. But after being together for so long, it would be a sin to leave anyone behind. Fine. He would get used to it after a while. However, Duque decided to give Alicia a gift. Close your eyes. She had doubts, but she did not hesitate. She knelt there and propped herself up without any concealment, revealing her beauty. She then gently raised her head and closed her eyes, quietly waiting for Duque to make his move. She trusted Duque unreservedly. Even if Duque gave her a sharp knife to kill herself in the next moment, she was willing to accept it. However, what she got was a surge of heat that she had never experienced before. It was like a clear spring in the mountains in summer. At the same time, it was like the boundless growth of cheerful vitality in spring. She could clearly feel that the white hair that she had grown due to working overtime and staying up late had fallen off by itself. The dry and split ends of her hair had also disappeared without a trace. There was also her skin. Although she had always taken good care of it, how could the skin of a 28-year-old mature woman be comparable to that of an 18-year-old girl? But at this moment, she felt as if an endless source of life was nourishing every corner of her body. Every inch and every cell in his body was singing in joy. Ah! Alicia finally cried out involuntarily. She looked at her delicate palm in disbelief. Then, almost recklessly, she turned around and rushed to the only full-length mirror in the room. The next moment, she suddenly understood what Duque's gift was. It was something that almost all human women in the world secretly yearned for and had always been envious of: the high elves, eternal youth. If it was given to her by someone else, she would most likely think that it was some kind of magic or high-level scam. But the person who gave her the gift was Duque. The Duque who saved the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, was also her lover. Duque gently hugged Alicia and whispered intimately, "Isn't it just 10 years? If you want, 100 years, 1,000 years, I can give it to you." Alicia was so excited that her tears were like a broken dam. She turned around and kissed Duque frantically. The second round of human alchemy had begun. The next morning, there was another military conference. William was dumbfounded to see that the two ladies who had participated in the military conference the day before had completely different reactions. Alicia was in high spirits. What was more exaggerated was that she seemed to be 10 years younger. In the past, William had felt that Alicia was a very obvious older sister. Why did he feel that she was the same age as his queen now? On the other hand, Queen Kalia. Her Majesty seemed to have not slept well the whole night. Even though she covered it with rouge and makeup, one could still see the obvious eye bags and dark circles under her eyes. Just as William was about to ask the queen if she had not slept well the night before, the old Anduin kicked him harshly under the table. On the contrary, the Bronzebeard brothers, who had just arrived with the new dwarf army today, looked confused. Then, Duque suddenly felt like strangling Magni's big mouth, because the dwarf king had made it clear from the start. "Duque, what the hell are you doing now? How many queens have you offended? Let me tell you. If you cause a civil war in the alliance because of this, I won't save you." His words made Kalia so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. She and Duque were innocent. Theoretically. Duque was embarrassed. He decided to be an ostrich. "I don't know anything. I really don't *king know anything. I don't care if you believe it or not, I believe it myself." Yes, the plan worked. In the following week, the alliance's two armies advanced at the same time. It was not considered a joint attack, but it was actually challenging the Calamity Army's bottom line. Without any obstacles, the alliance's southern army recovered the Dalajan ruins. Along the way, the number of wandering undead they encountered was only in the 4 digits, which had nothing to do with the Calamity troop. William went up excitedly and cleaned them up in a few moments. The boring victory made William lose interest. "Uncle Duque, will the Scholomance Academy resist more fiercely? If I had known, I would have gone there to take a look." "No. There won't be any fierce resistance there," Lothar said with certainty. "Why?" William continued to ask. "Because the one in control of the Calamity Army is no longer the Lich King Zul. If I'm not wrong, when Archimonde descends, the control of the Calamity Army will fall into the hands of the Dreadlord tribe. Of course, they would want more of Zul's loyal followers to be destroyed. The Scholomance Academy nurtured people from the Cursed Church, and the founder of the Cursed Church, Kel Thuzad, was a loyal follower of Zul and Arthas. The cunning Dreadlord was, of course, happy to see the Scholomance Academy kneel down. On the other side, the liches that had been transformed from high elves were also happy to see this scene. Would Arthas and Kel Thuzad, these two lone commanders, rush to save the Scholomance Academy? Chapter 855. Caer Daren, the former base of the Berev family, was on the island in the middle of the lake. At this moment, the huge city gate seemed to be under unimaginable pressure, and it was creaking. Every nail, every huge wooden plank, and every piece of reinforced steel frame on the city gate that was wrapped in a thick layer of fine steel skin was trembling, as if it would fall apart at any moment. It was the Dark Dean of Scholomance, Gandling. His dark magic was exploding uncontrollably under the stimulation of the powerful holy light outside the door. He looked at the dark apprentices behind him with pity, and he tried to suppress the unstable structure of the space due to the powerful mysterious power. He reminded them with difficulty, "Run for your lives. Those who were killed by Ashbringer won't even have the chance to revive." Run? Where to? Within a radius of several kilometers, there were Griffin Knights in the sky, warships specially towed by steam tractors on the surface of the water, and Naga and Murloc troops that had been specially summoned to the bottom of the water. The one in charge was even the Murloc prophet Maugr, who had advanced to the Radiant Moon rank. The surrounding space was still completely sealed by the Dalajan mages led by Krasis with a magic array. Regardless of whether Anastrian would come or not, even if he did, no one would be able to save them if Duke entered the battlefield at any time. Unless the entire Scourge army came to rescue them. But was it possible? Not when the Dreadlord family controlled almost all the high-level undead. With the last tone of Gadon's words, there was finally an overwhelming sound of metal tearing and giant wood twisting and shattering at the huge city gate. The gate, which was more than 10 meters tall, collapsed. In the swirling dust, two burly figures emitting golden light appeared in front of the dark acolytes and necromancers, ignoring the interference of the dust. Die! Fallen ones! Mograine swung, Ashbringer, which was as large as a door, and hundreds of evil souls within 100 meters let out shrill screams before they could even get close. Then, under the blazing platinum light, they were turned into ashes. Retreat? Where could they retreat to? Under normal circumstances, they would retreat to the depths of Scholomance and use traps and mechanisms to deal the most damage to the Alliance. Don't forget, history is very different. The Berev family, which had joined Scholomance in the past, had lost 2 unfilial sons, but the old Duke was still living well in Elwyn Forest. Caer Darrow was a territory that the Berev family had operated for centuries. What Gadon knew, the Berev family knew. What Gadon didn't know, the Berev family knew. It was a tunnel of uncanny workmanship that connected the bottom of the lake to the island in the middle of the lake. Furthermore, it had been enhanced by concealment magic, preventing detection from those below the Breaking Dawn realm. It had not been opened for over 30 years. A super holy bomb made by the best dwarves and gnome craftsmen was secretly transported to the lowest level of Scholomance. When the lake water mixed with holy light shot out from the ventilation holes of every room in the academy, the outcome of this battle was already decided. Mograine slashed, Ashbringer, in the air, and the golden sword light that seemed to be able to extend endlessly hit Dean Gadon's black magic shield like lightning, exploding into sparks all over the sky. This was the result of Gadon using lightning and dodging most of the power of Ashbringer. If he had been hit directly, he would probably have been killed instantly. The surrounding space became more and more viscous, and even a powerhouse of Gadon's level could only flash to a mere 20 meters away. Usually, a flash was at least 100 or 200 meters away. Gadon groaned in pain and directly abandoned the magic shield on his body that had been corroded by the holy light. He tumbled down from the air and rolled a few times on the ground under the effect of the momentum before he stabilized himself. However, just as he summoned a new void demon and tried to sacrifice this demon to become his magic shield again, another ball of holy light brushed past his fingertips and hit his summoned demon. That was Saidan Dathrahan's Hammer of Wrath. The hammer made of golden holy light smashed the void demon into pieces. It was too late for Gadon to anti-summon it. The sharp pain from the soul connection told Gadon that this void demon was finished, and its existence had been completely erased from the entire universe by the holy light. The scorching air current with the shock wave of the explosion blew Dean Gadon, who had just gotten up from the ground, several somersaults. He crossed the potholed battlefield and finally crashed into the blacksmith's shop where the undead blacksmith was working just a moment ago. Gadon's old bones were stopped by an incomparably heavy iron felt. He knocked over a red-hot iron ingot on the iron felt, and the high-temperature red iron ingot imprinted on his shoulder, making a sizzling sound that was unknown whether it was roasted meat or bones. For an undead who had been resurrected twice, physical injuries were not important. What was really tragic was the subsequent blow. The brilliant brilliance of Ashbringer broke Gadon in half at the waist. Not only in the physical sense, but also on the soul level. His soul, which was originally full and complete, was suddenly left with only half of it. Ah! Gadon let out a shrill scream. When he struggled on the ground with his bloodless upper body, 2 holy knights stood in front of him. Do you want to repent? A degenerate who pushed his friends and family into hell. Satan's face was full of ridicule. His Majesty the Lich King. Gadon opened his arms, trying to make one last fanatical shout with his remaining soul. Who would have thought that before he could finish, the huge Ashbringer had already chopped him into pieces like a mountain-splitting axe. The evil body finally turned into ashes and dissipated in the air. Saidan rolled her eyes. I thought you would let him finish shouting before killing him. What did Duque say again? The sad cry of a dog can be quite interesting sometimes. Ignoring Saidan's frivolity, Mograine waved his hand, and a large number of holy knights rushed in to wipe out the remaining enemies in Scallamance. At this time, he turned his head to look at Saidan Dathrahan. Saidan, I have seen too many disgusting undead who escape at the last moment. That's why I won't relax until I completely destroy them. You also have to be careful. Even if it is you, if you are careless, you may end up like Antonidas and have your body taken over, ending up with a ruined reputation. Ever since the Holy Knights decided to walk on the path of holy light, they have never been afraid of death, but we must die for something. A shiver came from the soul, and it made Saidan shiver. Perhaps it was because she sensed the tragic fate in her original history, or maybe it was some strange sixth sense. This time, Saidan really listened to him. At the same time, Duque, who had conquered the Dalajan ruins, found Antonida's last gift. Chapter 856. With a hint, it was not too difficult to find. Without a hint, even 10,000 elite rangers and bandits who were good at searching would not be able to find it. Only the heavens knew why mages hid things so well. Looking at the Dalajan ruins that had been reduced to rubble, and even the average elevation of the ground had been plowed down by a few meters by Archimonde's mana, Duque felt a little uneasy. Because what Antonidas wanted him to find were 3 sewer pipes that were 200 meters east of his mage tower. They looked no different from the other sewer pipes in the Dalajan. When Duque used the incantation left behind by Antonidas and cast a small spell on his eyes, his entire vision changed. He could not help but admire the amazing thoughts and imagination of the Dalajan mages. This little method was very simple. It was to use an elemental barrier spell to construct a small lens in front of the eyes to filter out certain elements. At this moment, it was filtering out all the frost elements, 2/3 of the fire elements, and 1/4 of the arcane elements. What appeared in front of Duque were 3 large arrowheads. Obviously, the focus of the 3 arrowheads was the treasure buried deep under the Dalajan ruins. It was an underground treasure vault that was 168 meters underground and covered by a layer of rock with a magical array. First of all, this depth was already insane. Secondly, it did not matter if it was dug out by the dwarves who were good at digging holes. The treasure vault had a perfect self-destruction function. Forcefully opening the treasure vault would only result in a floor full of debris. Duque, accompanied by Elugia who had recovered as a radiant moon mage, as well as Andoin, William, and the Bronzebeard brothers, sighed deeply, and used a unique spell to activate the few remaining sewer pipes. Brian found that he could see through the ground and see the water pipes that were buried underground. The pipes were so bright that he could even see the surface of the ground, and they extended all the way underground. Brian was dumbfounded. What the hell? Brother, it's a pity that Muradin is not here anymore. If he was, he would definitely nag us for at least 10 years for missing out on this. Magni knocked his hammer lightly on Boulang's head. Fool. We don't have to keep it a secret. His spirit in heaven will see it. Duque didn't dare to speak at all. Was he supposed to tell Magni, I purposely didn't tell you that your brother is still alive so that you can turn your grief into strength so that you can focus on creating Ashbringer? Duque, who was a little conflicted, decided to find a chance to confess later. Alright, I'll send my doppelganger down first. Wait. Generally speaking, a Dalajan treasury like this is completely isolated from magical communication. Even if it's an avatar, how would it be able to send a message back? Duque smiled mysteriously. I have my own plan. Duke snapped his fingers, and a doppelganger that looked exactly like him appeared in front of everyone. Even its movements were vivid and lifelike. Magni's mouth gaped open. What the hell? Are all magicians this good at magic tricks? Boulang echoed, that's right, that's right. Almost at the same time, the 2 Duques spoke. Duque's doppelganger, who was walking towards the magic array that appeared, smiled. If other Breaking Dawn mages hear this, they might beat you up. The real Duque shrugged. Fortunately, you're my brother. I don't care if my magic is said to be the magic of wandering mages. The two dwarves' jaws dropped, and they couldn't close for a long time. Apart from the two dwarves, William was also shocked speechless. He turned his head and looked at Lothar with his young face. Uncle Andoin, are all Breaking Dawn mages so powerful? What should I do if I really have to fight a Breaking Dawn mage? Andoin touched the back of his head, only to realize that there were no hairlines on his forehead. He sighed awkwardly. No, regardless of whether he's a Breaking Dawn mage or not, it seems that Duque is the only one as perverted as Duque. As for fighting a Breaking Dawn mage, unless he has the skills of a pioneer warrior, there's no way he can fight now. Who knew that even Alicia was muttering softly, if Duke really had that many, we wouldn't have to fight so hard. Duque was speechless. He really didn't know if Alicia said that for him, or if she was just expressing her feelings. Antonida's magical defense array was very complete, and all types of magic were isolated. Once the doppelganger entered, not a single magic message could be sent out. Even so, Duque had a solution. After a while, a short and long knocking sound came from the depths of the earth. Of course, ordinary people wouldn't be able to sense such a weak vibration, but the system elf could. A simple Morse code would solve the problem. Short, short, this is S, short, long, is E, short, long, yes, is F, short, is E, safe. Safe. Duque said in a language that the others couldn't understand, causing them to be stunned. It was still Magni who was the most sensitive. He suddenly raised his hand and shouted, "Wait, your doppelganger uses knocking to send signals. Is it Morse code?" Of course, Duque answered instinctively. Magni immediately took out a loudspeaker and placed it on the ground, pressing it to his ear. He even made a "shoo" gesture for everyone to be quiet. His third brother did the same. The two respectable dwarves huddled on the ground, listening to the weak sounds coming from the depths of the earth. It had to be said that when it came to digging underground, dwarves were first-rate experts. There's really a sound. Although it's very weak. Magni was the first to shout. Heavens! Why didn't we think of this before? Metal conducts sound better than metal. In the future, we can rely on knocking on the rails to send the signals we set. The magical Bulang understood by analogy. We don't have to be exploited by those greedy human magicians anymore. Last time, that bastard said that my spies told me that my precious daughter was hanging out with a charcoal-like dwarf. He even dared to charge me 500 gold coins for this information. I only found out later that my spy didn't send such a message at all. Magni was indignant. Duque looked constipated. In fact, he really wanted to tell Magni, your precious daughter is really like a charcoal-like dark iron dwarf, and it's F** King true love. Now, Duque didn't dare to complicate the issue. The alliance was already annoyed enough. He didn't want another battle between the Bronzebeards and the dark iron dwarves, at least not now. Ignoring the Bronzebeards, who were ecstatic because of the sudden discovery, Duque walked into the portal with Alicia. A halo covered both Duque and Alicia. After a feeling of descending like an elevator, Duque saw a small room. It was a room covered in frost. In the middle of the room, in a long round icicle, a beautiful sky-blue staff was sealed. Chapter 857. The white staff had a psychedelic translucent feel to it. At the top of the staff was a round blue base. On the base was a white jade-like angel with both hands clasped together in a praying posture. It looked a little like white jade, but upon closer inspection, it looked like a silver-plated metal. It was a staff that should have been frozen in an ice pillar, but behind the angel statue were 12 blue arcane stars that were distributed in the shape of a clock, rotating slowly in a clockwise direction. It was exceptionally beautiful. Duque said casually, this should be a gift left behind by Antonidas. All women love to be beautiful. Alicia subconsciously cupped her face and exclaimed, wow! What a beautiful staff. It's a pity, this aura is only used by Breaking Dawn mages, isn't it? Duque smiled and gazed at Alicia. I'll use it for the time being. I'll give it to you when you reach breaking dawn. Alicia was stunned. Then, what are you going to use? I don't really like using staffs, unless it's a very powerful one. Otherwise, I won't bother using it. After saying that, Duque thought of something and added, actually, I still have the Patish, the legendary staff of the Guardian, from Mediv. One day, I'll recast that divine staff. Hearing Duque's words, Alicia was relieved. Her eyes curved into two crescent moons as she smiled. It seems that even for this staff, I have to work hard to break through to breaking dawn. Duque rolled his eyes. Only a sorceress like Alicia, who had no desires on the path of mystery, would be able to put the cart before the horse to such an extent of training purely for the sake of a beautiful staff. Alright, it's time to get down to business. Abila. Dumacat. Salon, softly chanting the spell that Antonidas had given him, Duque extended his right hand forward as if he had touched the surface of a calm lake. Magic ripples spread in the air, and when the azure radiance spread throughout the vault, the piece of ice that had sealed the staff disappeared without a trace. It was as if the ice was just an illusion. Duque let go of Alicia's hand and stepped forward. He subconsciously reached out with his right hand, and then, grabbed nothing. Like a proud kitten that refused to be touched by strangers, the blue and white staff spun in a small circle in the air, evading Duque's grasp. A cross-shaped vein appeared on Duque's forehead. This time, he reached out at an even faster speed, but missed again. Pfft! This time, even Alicia, who was watching from the side, laughed out loud. What the hell? Duque was about to flip out when he suddenly received a prompt from the system elf. Dear host, it seems to want you to hold it with your left hand. Ha! Left hand. Duque listened to the system elf's prompt and stretched out his left hand this time. Suddenly, the proud kitten turned into a docile little kitten and landed on Duque's left palm. Almost as soon as he held the staff that was more than a meter long, incomparably complex and mysterious purple-blue arcane runes covered the entire body of the staff. Duque looked at it attentively, and suddenly a large list of prompts appeared on his retina. Frowny face Obsidian Queen, bound after pickup. Unique. Secondary staff, cannot equip another staff after equipping, 50-85 damage, speed 3. 0, attribute, arcane level, demigod requirement, Breaking Dawn mage, owner of, arcane throne, and, crown of ice, magic circuit. It is estimated that the attributes of the equipped user will be increased as follows: plus 50 endurance, plus 88 intelligence equip, plus 20% arcane magic damage equip, plus 40% arcane magic conversion efficiency equip, plus 20% critical strike rating equip, increase magic hit rating by 32 equip, increase magic hit rating by 32 as long as you are in a place connected to the arcane elemental world, default plus 255 spirit. Equip, automatically activates a magic shield, by default, can absorb up to 550 damage. Cooldown, 60 seconds equip, you have an additional, arcane energy, cooldown, 300 seconds, does not conflict with the cooldown of the arcane circuit caused by the activation of, arcane energy. After looking at the attributes of this strange secondary staff, Duque was dumbfounded. It was not that this staff was not impressive, but it was too impressive. Putting aside the harsh requirements that were almost exclusive to Antonidas, even though it was a demigod weapon, its attributes were even more impressive than many of the divine weapons in his impression. For example, the Patish, legendary staff of the Guardian, in Duque's impression, its intelligence was just over 100. Duque really liked staff that directly increased percentage. This was many times better than staff that increased attributes. A life-saving magic shield that could be used once every 60 seconds was definitely a praise. That extra burst was a godly skill among godly skills. If he were to praise it, then Duque would like to give it 10,000 times. But, after equipping this staff, he could no longer use other staffs. This staff could actually increase spirit by 255 in most cases. What the hell was this? Spirit was a little useless for mages, but it was better than nothing. Spirit was an attribute that was generally used by priests and other healer professions, and the plus 40% arcane magic conversion efficiency always made Duque feel, did I just take a wand-type magic battery? There were so many things that Duque wanted to complain about in his heart that it was almost comparable to the stars in the sky. In the end, Duque finally understood why Antonidas did not use this staff himself. On the table where the staff was originally stored, Duque found a handwritten book. On it was written Antonidas' diary, or rather, last words. Today. I finally got my body back, but I am no longer human, but a dirty great lich. I hate this state. Although I am old, I have never wanted to survive in this form. However, I have to hypnotize myself and tell myself that if I can continue to exist, I can do more magic and explore more mysteries. Otherwise, I will not be able to fool that bastard Zul's soul search. I am going to Kuel Salis soon, but today the Dreadlord asked me for the Book of Mediv. I guess it should be to summon a super demon from the Burning Legion, perhaps kill Jaden or Archimond. I guess it is more of the latter. Fortunately, I have a copy, which gives me a chance to tamper with it. I used a part of my own soul to replace some key bytes. If I fall, this copy will naturally be damaged. Duque, I do not know if you will see this handwritten book. If you see it, I hope you can understand how powerless pure elemental damage is against a truly powerful demon. Just like how I was defeated by the Dreadlord. You need to highly concentrate your magic, otherwise you will not be able to harm these great demons. Perhaps my path is wrong, but at least there is hope. Chapter 858. The second half of the letter described a mage profession that Duque was both familiar and unfamiliar with. Duque looked at it and exclaimed, damn. Battle mage, this class-sounding profession evoked a memory that had been sealed away for a long time. Before he transmigrated, many players would remove the Azeroth. It was a time when Lordaeron had collapsed. The once glorious people of Lordaeron had formed the famous Scarlet Crusade. In the Scarlet Crusade dungeon, there was an area called the Scarlet Zone. The Scarlet Zone was not a popular dungeon and most players were not familiar with it, so it was common for the team to be wiped out. But the most terrifying elite monsters were even scarier than the bosses. They were the seemingly ordinary red-cloaked battle mages. When Duque first came, he thought it was just an ordinary monster that wielded two weapons. In its right hand was a seemingly powerful flaming sword and in its left hand was an ordinary staff. Ah! It sold swords and made staffs at the same time. Duke joked. Then, he was so amusing that he, a mage, dared to run over and start the fight. Well, there was always a price to pay for underestimating someone. Duke had forgotten that the famous mage in Lord of the Rings, Mr. Gon Tofu, who was also known as the Berserker Mage, was also a dual-wielding sword-wielding staff. One could imagine that a person with such an ability was no ordinary person. These elite pharaohs' skills were quite strong. Their arcane explosion could push Duque back and attract more monsters. The shockwave from Morning dealt a lot of fire damage, and it also had a movement speed reduction effect. There was also the continuous damage spell Sacrifice. For a newbie mage like Duque who had good green equipment, he did not know that this spell could be dispelled. The result? He was defeated. Without a doubt, he was defeated. Duze used all of his skills, Flash, Ring of Frost, Icicle, and Wind Blast, but he couldn't even run back to the door and run out of the dungeon. He was brutally killed less than 10 steps away from the dungeon's door. Then, the second time, Duque did not believe it and was killed by the battle mage's staff and flaming sword. Only then did he realize how cruel this world was. Then, there was no then. Step by step, the companions worked together to pull these small monsters out and torture them to death. Battle mages weren't a mainstream class in Azeroth, but they appeared repeatedly in major dungeons, torturing the players for a long time. Looking carefully, battle mage could actually have a part-time job. After thinking about it, Duque was speechless. Alright, this was the real world after all. There weren't as many rules and regulations as in the game. Just like the first generation of holy knights back in the day, they were all either priests or warriors. In fact, they didn't forget their own profession's skills. In a sense, this was considered a part-time job. Duque pondered for a moment and smiled. This is... Antonidas actually asked me to take on the role of a battle mage? What was this? All right. This can barely be considered a path. However, now that he had a secondary weapon, what about the main weapon? Mainstream staffs were all two-handed weapons. This weird secondary staff was troublesome enough, and Duque did not have a good one-handed weapon. So, Duque casually took the only one-handed weapon he had with his right hand. Yes. It was the unknown one-handed weapon that Lothar had given him. The next moment, Duque felt that fate was playing a joke on him. Looking at the holy sword that shone with a golden light and its attributes, Duque suddenly found that he had lost the ability to roast it. Well, he didn't know where to start even if he wanted to. On the other side, he encountered a problem that he had never thought of before he came to Azeroth. Because of his weight, buoyancy, and the laws of the world, he could not use any teleportation or flying skills in Azeroth. This meant that he had to walk to the Well of Eternity. The endless ocean separated the Eastern Kingdom and the Kalimdor continent. This was not a problem for him. Demons did not need to breathe anyway, so he walked directly to the bottom of the sea from the South Stream coast. Originally, with his speed, even if he walked, he would definitely cross the endless ocean in more than a week. In theory, that was the case. However, he was tricked. 10,000 meters under the sea, he could not even see his fingers in front of him. The only thing he could rely on was his perception of the continent's magnetic field. However, an intelligent existence that had a deep-seated hatred for Archimonde cleverly used a magic tool to interfere with Archimonde's perception, causing this demon commander to foolishly run to the center of the endless ocean. One must know that the center of the ocean was not once a sea. This was the center of the ancient war 10,000 years ago, the location of the Well of Eternity. The big explosion back then had blown the continent into pieces. And the remaining super-high energy vortex had become a vortex trap that even Archimonde could not easily escape from. He was directly trapped. In the distance, a female Naga with 6 arms used a special underwater communication method to ask her leader, "My lord. Aren't we indirectly helping the night elves who exiled us back then?" The Naga leader with a huge body and incomparably seductive upper body replied, "Perhaps. But those bastards from the Burning Legion. They actually dump such disgusting pollutants into the sea. If I don't take revenge, how can I vent my anger?" Impressively, there was an ugly corrosion mark on her collarbone above her left chest. Women all loved beauty. Even if they had fallen from the beautiful high elves to the Naga with a snake lower body, they had never forgotten their natural love of beauty. Because of Du's shameless actions in the Well of the Sun, the Naga of the deep sea had fallen for it, and then Archimonde had inexplicably been implicated. Fortunately, Duque did not know. Otherwise, that bastard Duque would only have laughed 3 times. No one had thought that things would actually turn out like this, buying incomparably precious time for the creatures on the 2 continents. If Archimonde had arrived within a week, it was obvious that many things would have immediately collapsed. For example, Jaina, who had just landed in Theramore. For example, the tribal army that had arrived not much earlier than Jaina. And then there was Duque's side. 2 incomparably exquisite invitations were almost sent to Duque's hands at the same time. When Duque saw it, his eyes widened. It must be something important for Mograine to abandon the army and personally come to invite Duque. "Her Majesty Queen Kalia's official ascension to the throne, please do me the honor of attending the ceremony." Next to her, also very familiar to Duque, was the youngest of the Windrunner family, Lilith. "Second sister is going to be queen, remember to come." Chapter 859. One of his own was going to be a queen, and it was 2 queens ascending the throne at once. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, worthy of celebration and celebration. However, if 2 queens who were close to him ascended the throne on the same day, then it would not be fun at all. A certain Du once had a dream, and that was to use the kingdoms that had sunk in the history of the alliance as sampans. He would make one sampan after another into a chain of ships, and then build an unsinkable aircraft carrier to ride on the sea. Now, the aircraft carrier had yet to appear, and the two large ships in his base were in danger of capsizing at the same time. At this moment, a certain Du thought of a certain pitiful person who was killed by his girlfriend with a hatchet. At this moment, a certain Du thought of the alliance starting a civil war against the Elven Ranger because of him. At this moment, a certain Du thought of the Lordaeron paladin angrily confronting the Elven Ranger. Duque's reaction was that of a dumbfounded one. At this moment, Duque, who was in the Dalajan Ruins military camp, would never know that at this moment, in the gorgeous Lordaeron Palace cum castle in the center of the holy city of Stratholme, two women who were about to become the most powerful on the continent were staring at each other. The room was newly cleaned, and most of the decorations in the room were from the time of Lordaeron. However, most of the furniture was very old, although it could still be seen that it had been well maintained and cleaned. The most new things in the room were the paintings hanging on the wall. Kalia, who was dressed in pure white priestly attire, used her soft fingertips to slide across the frame of a well-framed painting. Her thoughts seemed to have returned to the distant end of the river of time. I've been to many places, many of which I've only seen in night novels 13 years ago. I've always been fascinated by these places, but 13 years ago, I thought that I would never have the chance to see these places with my own eyes. I've been to Stranglethorn Vale, and was chased for 3 days and 3 nights by trolls who liked to hunt their heads. From the edge of Zul Gurub in the east, through Lake Nafaridi, all the way to the Reef Sea in the west. It was only when the murlocs by the sea covered us that we escaped. That time, Lilith alone killed 386 trolls. I've been to the Swamp of Sorrows. At that time, the swamp was still a gloomy and terrifying place. However, in order to connect Overwatch Castle and Redridge Mountain Fortress into one, Duque carried out a large-scale development there. Riadaline and I pretended to be clerics who came to help and volunteered for half a year. I've also been to Burning Steppes, Scorching Canyon and Barren Lands. I've killed wild wolves with my own hands and killed orcs with Smite. I've seen the pure white snow of Dan Maluo, walked through the mud of the wetland, and almost died in the swamp. From the earthy highlands that were almost razed to the ground after the war, to the thriving Hillsbrad Hills, to the scorched Silverpine Forest. After that, the 4 of us crossed the ocean to the west and arrived at the Kalimdor continent that most humans and elves had never been to before. We used 8 years to basically wander from the southernmost Tanaris Desert to the more northernmost Azhara and Grey Valley. 2 continents, dozens of areas. Other than the areas controlled by the High Elves and Night Elves, I've been to all the places that I could go. I've seen with my eyes that should have been imprisoned in Lordaeron's high tower. I've touched with my hands that should have only been used for court etiquette and musical instruments, as well as to serve the king's husband. I've felt with my skin that even the amount of time I spend under the sun is limited. I've truly experienced with my soul. Kalia's voice involuntarily became high-pitched. Her fingertips slid across the oil paintings that she had painted with her own hands, evoking all the memories that had made her happy, made her sad, inspired her, and made her sad in the past 13 years. When the memories of the paintings appeared in her mind again, she couldn't help but complete another spiritual journey. At this moment, Servanas, who was supposed to stay in Quell, the Loss, unexpectedly appeared here. He had been sitting quietly on the guest seat in the middle of the room since the beginning, gently sipping his black tea. He put down the teacup in the most elegant manner, and in the interval between the queen-to-be Kalia, who was immersed in her memories, he finally spoke. Servanas used a sonorous and powerful voice to narrate a cruel truth that hit the nail on the head. So what? Princess Kalia. Have you ever thought about it? It might have been intentional, it might have been unintentional. The result is that you became a hidden pawn in Duque's hands for 13 years. Kalia's movements suddenly stopped, as if she had been hit by a spell that stopped time. Yes. Servanas was right. What a coincidence. That kind of coincidence was so perfect that it was hard not to think of it as a conspiracy. Just when Arthas fell into depravity and killed his father, Duque quickly rushed back and took over the most elite army in the whole of Lordaeron. Then, he grandly pushed out Kalia, the golden signboard that no one could refute or oppose. Within a few days, he stabilized the situation of the collapsing Lordaeron. Come to think of it, you, Duque, as the deputy commander of the alliance, created the illusion that the princess of the Lordaeron alliance had died tragically. Then, when the kingdom collapsed, you quickly released the princess. If you had to attribute this to a conspiracy theory, it would be really hard to find evidence to refute it. Seeing Kalia's reaction, Servanas elegantly curled his fingers and took another sip of black tea. Then, Kalia smiled. Her bright smile was completely stretched out, immediately making people think of an ocean of flowers blooming in spring. It was a smile that contained everything. A pawn? A conspiracy? Or could it be that Duque had already foreseen all of this, and then thought of how to benefit from it 13 years ago? If this is your question, then my answer is... So what? That. Again. Like. What? Kalia's magnanimous attitude made Servanas a little jealous. Kalia held her head high and chest out. She gracefully walked over with small steps and stood in front of Servanas. That year, I was still underage. At that age where women loved to fantasize the most, which girl did not fantasize about their Prince Charming? If you ask me who is the Prince Charming in my heart, then from the past until now, there has only been one. At this moment, it was Servanas's turn to freeze. She remained silent and continued to listen to what Kalia seemed to be saying. If this was really a conspiracy, then Duque should have used my affection for him 13 years ago to completely possess me. When I came back to my senses, maybe I would already be the mother of several children, and each child's surname would be Marcus. By the time my evil brother killed my father, Menethil's blood had already been changed to Marcus's. Chapter 860. Kalia's voice was not loud, but each word was like a needle, stabbing into Sylvanas's chest. If Duque had not saved me back then what awaited me would have been a full 13 years of house arrest. It would have been a hopeless, gloomy life. But what did Duque give me? Freedom. From birth until now, half of my life's worth of freedom. I can do whatever I want, go wherever I want, be it mountains or seas, or swamps or jungles. My 3 companions will accompany me, and do their best to ensure my safety. If this is also Duque's plot to capture my heart, then he has succeeded. I will have no regrets even if I have to sacrifice myself, or the entire Lordaeron. Freedom. What a precious word. If it were a high elf, it would easily be 1,000 years of imprisonment. For a windrunner, he would probably commit suicide in a few years. Sylvanas was extremely intelligent. Although she did not like to use her intelligence in politics and conspiracies, she had already vaguely understood why Kalia had sent a secret letter to find her, and wanted to talk to her face to face. She gently put down the teacup of black tea, and placed her left elbow on the armrest of the chair. Her palm rested on her cheek, and she made an elegant and relaxed posture. Well then, why do you insist on setting our Ascension Day on the same day? Are you forcing Duque to make a choice? Kalia laughed instead. Like a lover asking for favors? Or are you putting the country on a scale and forcing Duque to weigh it? How is this possible? He has never been a man who would change his decisions because of power. If that was the case, he would have become my legal husband long before that so-called Lord of Presto. Sylvanas's beautiful eyes turned. Then what do you mean? If not for Duque, both Lordaeron and Cuel Salis would have been destroyed long ago. Since we both had our hearts set on the same man, even if Duque was unable to establish the next Arajuo Empire in the future, we should at least let Duque have an alliance where he could use his talents as he pleased. I plan to let the Rotterdam Kingdom give up their position as the leader of the alliance. Even so, I hope that Duque's resolution will get a majority of votes in the alliance. Sylvanas narrowed her eyes. You mean that our 2 countries should advance and retreat together? Kalia said firmly, yes. From the military, to politics, to the economy, they advanced and retreated together in all aspects. If possible, I hope that Miss Alucia can rebuild Alterac. With the addition of the Dalajan, which is destined to be controlled by the Breaking Dawn wizard Duque, and Stormwind, which has always supported Duque, we will have at least 5 votes. Servanas rubbed his eyebrows. Kalia had formed a harem alliance. As someone who had helped Duque guard his home for 10 years, and her 4th sister had always followed Kalia, she obviously knew that Duque had been a gentleman to Kalia for 13 years. Yet it was like this. Even if Kalia was rejected by Duque emotionally, she still wanted to become Duque's hardcore supporter. This made Sylvanas a little speechless. No matter what, the two neighboring countries had a common enemy and common interests. In addition, their leaders were all loyal to the same man. It would be unreasonable not to unite. If they wanted to be jealous, they would have done so long ago. In any case, the 3 sisters would be by Duque's side in the future. This was an absolute advantage. After thinking about it, Sylvanas sighed helplessly and stretched out his hand. I can't think of any reason to refuse. All right, we can only let that rascal Duque take advantage of it. Kalia smiled brightly. 2 beautiful hands, 2 hands with the most power in the continent, were held together just like that. Then, let us discuss the details of the coronation ceremony. On Duque's side, a completely dumbfounded Duque was pacing back and forth. Lillis was careless, and did not know the key point at all. Mograine smiled bitterly. Of course, he understood his queen's thoughts. Perhaps on a national level, even if the Rotterdam lost 2/3 of its territory, it would still be able to suppress the elves in terms of national power. In terms of relationships, Queen Kalia had not entered Duque's circle at all. He subconsciously thought that the queen was messing around, and would definitely make Duque unhappy. Didn't the dignified Princess Kurtiraz's marriage break off just because Duque said so? On the other side, William secretly asked Andoin, "Uncle, this is..." Andoin rolled his eyes. First, I'm not good at this kind of thing with women. Second, no outsider can save Duque from this kind of thing. So, let's just watch the show. William sighed along with him. In the end, Duque had no choice but to secretly ask for Alucia's opinion. However, Alucia smiled. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. Although Her Highness Kalia has become more opinionated after becoming an adult, they are not unreasonable people. Duque was exasperated. Then what is this? Coronation on the same day? Both of them are treating me. Do you want me to rush to the venue, or do you want me to clone myself thousands of kilometers away? No matter what I do, it will be disrespectful to the other country. Alucia let out a clear laugh. She covered her mouth and laughed without saying a word. Ha 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 ha. That night, a new piece of news came, shocking Duque and the other big shots of the alliance. Queen Kalia's coronation ceremony was not in the holy city of Stratholme as everyone had imagined. Queen Sylvanas's coronation ceremony was not in the ruins of Silvermoon City. The reason why the 2 queens chose to coronate on the same day was that both countries had a common enemy, the Death Knight Arthas and the Scourge army. In order to rebuild the kingdom and work together in the post-alliance era, the 2 queens jointly decided to hold the coronation ceremony on the 25th of September at the Salis Trail on the border between the 2 countries. In a sense, as a big country, Rotterdam had made more concessions. Silvermoon City had become history, and the reconstruction of the new Silvermoon City was still far away, but Stratholme was still there. Moreover, the power of the 2 countries was disproportionate. Even though they were facing a disaster now, Rotterdam still had more than 1 million soldiers and civilians in the eastern plague lands. And Kuel Salis only had a little more than 100,000 elves left. But Queen Kalia was determined to do it. Unable to convince Kalia, Mograine and the others could only pinch their noses and accept it. Time flew, and the day arrived in the blink of an eye. When Duque arrived at the scene, he was a little dumbfounded. Miraculously, there were 2 coronation thrones, or rather, half of a country. This was because the southern half of the rank 9 throne had the typical Rotterdam style, luxurious and exaggerated. Although the northern half also had the gorgeous artistic style of the High Elves, because the queen was a ranger, there were many more elements of the forest. Frankly speaking, these two combinations looked neither fish nor fowl when looked at together. Unfortunately, all of this was not the main point. You put a chair in between the two queens' thrones. What are you trying to do? Duque was under a lot of pressure. Chapter 861. As the Storm Grand Duke and the commander of the alliance, Duque was definitely qualified to attend the coronation ceremony of the two queens. But to sit on the seat that was side by side with the throne, this was too much. The moment he saw that seat, Duque realized that the seat that was on the same level as the throne was probably for him. Almost immediately, he decided that it was not appropriate. In the huge tent that was temporarily set up, as soon as the outsiders were chased away, Duque flew into a rage on the spot. In front of the two queens, Duque asked directly, "What are you doing? Who is that seat for? Don't tell me you want me to sit on it." "Yes. It's for you," Cervantes answered without hesitation. Duque gritted his teeth. Why? When the alliance was first established, the kings made a declaration that no commander's position could be higher than the king's. The commander is just a coordinator, not a ruler. Cervantes threw out an answer that Duque had never thought of. Because you inherited the will of Alonsis Fail. But, I'm a mage. Duque looked constipated. I asked Riataline. When you and I attacked together, the golden soul coin that you made should be condensed from the will of the former Archbishop of Holy Light. Am I right? Duque was speechless. At the side, Kalia began to sing. Why did the Calamity army invade so quickly? Why did Lordaeron and Cuel Salis collapse so easily? Why did the Church of the Cursed easily infiltrate the upper echelons of the two kingdoms? The former prince of Lordaeron has fallen. Cervantes continued, the king of Cuel Salis has also fallen. And Darkan and the other members of the Silver Moon Council. Kalia continued, doesn't this show how much harm the lack of faith has caused to the world? So, after our discussion, the upper echelons of the two kingdoms unanimously decided that from the day we ascend the throne, to fight against evil and to purify ourselves, the two kingdoms will worship the Church of the Holy Light as the national religion. We will vigorously promote the training of priests and paladins. Cervantes continued, at the same time, the elites of our two countries will be under your command to deal with the upcoming Archaran Crusade. They made so much sense that Duque had nothing to say. If they wanted to push Duque out from a personal point of view, Duque would not agree no matter what. The problem was that Duque had indeed inherited Alonsis' moral integrity. There was no way to deny it. After all, Duque had been the last person to see the Archbishop of the Church of the Archbishop. At that time, all the clergies in Stratholme saw the Archbishop give Duke a Holy Light inheritance. Of course, the position of Archbishop of the Holy Light was passed on to Uther. The problem was that the Church of Holy Light pursued selflessness and dedication too much, which actually conflicted with the interests of the nobles. Even though Uther was the Archbishop of the Church of the Holy Light, when Uther and Arthas clashed, Tyrrhenus, who was determined to have more royal power than divine power, demoted Uther. Even though Uther also held the position of Archbishop of the Holy Light, when Uther and Arthas had a conflict, Tyrrhenus, who was determined to have more royal power than divine power, immediately demoted Uther. Now, there were many people who had the Holy Knight's legacy, but they were all fighting. There was no one who could truly represent the will of the Holy Light. Now, there were many people who had the Holy Knight's legacy, but all of them were fighters. There was no one who could truly represent the will of the Holy Light. It was not impossible to bring up Duque from this angle. Kalia added fuel to the fire, Duque, just agree. Now that there is a craze for revenge in both kingdoms, I feel that there is a need to properly guide this hatred. Mograine, Abendus, and Dathrahan all believe that you, who have the true legacy of Archbishop Fail, can indeed represent the will of the Holy Light. At this time, Elucia, who had been following behind Duque silently, said to Duque, Touraine and Windsor have also agreed. Sylvanus narrowed her eyes. Riadeline, who is about to form the Holy Knights in our kingdom, also thinks that you are very suitable. Duque suddenly realized that he had been sold out by his women. If he did not stand up, he might really let the historical Scarlet Crusade rise again. Since ancient times, countless history had proven that fanatics were not destined to have a good ending. It was precisely because of their extreme nature that extremists would never receive the support of the masses. Since he had already saved Mograine and Abendis, he would not be able to forgive himself if he allowed them to go back to their old ways. Duque scratched his head. All right, you've convinced me. Although in a way that I hate. In the big tent, the three women showed expressions of joy at the same time. Elucia said with a smile, Are you done with your official business? Now that the official business was done, it was time for private matters. Suddenly, the two queens, who had been so majestic just a moment ago, flinched a little at the same time. Of course, Queen Kalia's reaction was slightly bigger. Knowing that she could not avoid it, Kalia stepped forward and bowed deeply. I'm sorry. This time, I was the one who suggested this first. Sylvanus indifferently interjected, but I agreed. Agreeing meant that she was an accomplice. Queen Sylvanus was quite loyal. Duque put his hands on his hips. I don't understand. What are you trying to achieve by doing this? Kalia raised her head. I just want to tell you and the world that the two of us and the kingdom behind us will support you unconditionally. Have you considered the reaction of the other kingdoms? What do you want Magni to think? What do you want Daelin to think? What do you want Varian to think? No, I think they will value your voice more. Now that the demon commander of the Burning Legion has arrived, according to Mediva's prophecy, there will be more crises of world destruction coming to Azeroth. What we need is a more united alliance, a single, correct voice. Of course, Duque knew that his actions in the future were correct. After all, the general trend was still going in that direction. He was also sure that most of his opinions were correct. But at this point, was the alliance still the alliance? Duque could not help but feel puzzled. Elucia spoke. Duque, you have not been here for the past 10 years. That's why you don't know how serious the internal strife within the alliance has been. If it wasn't for the Stormwind Kingdom and the Iron Furnace Fort holding the fort, the alliance would have withdrawn the army from the watchtower and cancelled the surveillance of the Burning Steppes and Scorching Canyon. Bastard! You're asking for it. Duque could not suppress his anger. Sylvanus blinked. That's why we're doing this, to give you more authority. Chapter 862. A fly would not bite a seamless egg. It was precisely because Sargeras paid a huge price and did not hesitate to lurk for hundreds of years to control Mediv. He opened a hole in the Azeroth protection circle that was originally tightly guarded, which led to a series of subsequent problems. In fact, Duque also realized that it was precisely because of the fall of the dragon aspect that led to the weakening of the planet's protection circle. Even if the Deathwing, Nesario, continued to live as a traitor, it might be better than killing him in advance. However, what made Duque regret and fear was not this, but the various uncertainties in the alliance. Different races, different kingdoms, and different demands. This difference was all around. In the alliance, one could seek common ground while reserving differences and pursue greater goals. Duque believed that when he was around, he was absolutely sure that he could control the itch and pain points of each country, and stimulate or urge each country to make the right choice with a common goal. After transmigrating here for so long, Duque discovered a fact: even if he had climbed to his current high position, he still could not completely prevent every tragedy. Especially when he was not in Azeroth, fate seemed to continue to move in the predetermined direction. Kalia and Queen Syriana teamed up to play a little trick, which made Duque a little unhappy. On the other hand, they also reminded Duque that he needed to cultivate more agents in the alliance who would firmly support him, so that in case he was not around, they could also stabilize the situation in the alliance. Duque, who was clear about the original history, knew very well that in the following years, the various kingdoms could be said to be in constant trouble. From another perspective, Duque was a little worried that things would go too far. Kalia's unprincipled support for him might cause dissatisfaction among the other kings of the alliance. This balance needed to be better grasped. Rubbing his eyebrows, Duque looked up at Kalia. The once extremely gentle princess had become mature, be it in temperament or mind. He still remembered that when they parted 10 years ago, Kalia was still an innocent and pure girl. Now that she had seen more, she naturally had her own opinions. Duque could not help but sigh. Unexpectedly, it was this sigh that caused Kalia's uneasy face to instantly turn pale. She gently clenched her skirt and lowered her head. Duque, do you not like what I'm doing? I just want to prove to you that I, too, can be like Eluhia, person who supports you from behind. If you hate me being involved in politics and power, I can give up all of this immediately. I don't care even if I have to be a puppet to pass on orders, because I... Duque looked at Kalia with a gentle gaze, just like when he had rescued Kalia from the cage in the palace 13 years ago. He had watched Kalia dance barefoot in the snow-covered fields. It was pure admiration without any distracting thoughts. However, Duque wasn't looking at Kalia's beautiful appearance. Instead, he was looking at her eyes, voice, expression, body language, and all sorts of other things, hoping to see through her heart. Then, he truly felt the pure and kind girl who did not forget her original heart. She had nothing else to ask for, but wholeheartedly wanted to repay the freedom he had given her back then. Gently stroking Kalia's head and letting her soft golden hair flow through his fingers, Duque revealed a faint smile. There's no need to deliberately distort your heart for someone. Living for others is a very tiring thing. I'm very grateful for your support, but I've always been doing things that are beneficial to the entire alliance and even the entire world. I think that any wise leader can see whether what I'm doing is right or not. Everyone can make mistakes, and there's no need to deify me. As long as you can scrupulously abide by your original heart and do your best to work for the development of the alliance, it's fine. Scrupulously abide by his original heart. For simple words sublimated Duque's entire state of mind. Kalia suddenly realized Duque's true thoughts. From the start, Duque had never thought of using Kalia or Servanas to achieve any specific goals for himself. It should be said that as long as they ascended to the throne, it was more than enough for him. At this time, those with a little information network knew that the 3 Windrunner sisters had long been taken care of by Duque. Kalia had also been with Duque for more than 10 years. Who didn't know that those 2 families would be hardcore supporters of Duque? If they made too big of a move as soon as they ascended the throne, it would instead agitate the other kings, who would worry that their own kingdoms would be peacefully evolved by Duque. After all, for the aristocratic forces that were used to playing political games, it was not uncommon for them to spend more than 100 years annexing other forces and developing their own families. Understanding all of this, Kalia felt a little ashamed. She was ashamed of her own political immaturity. She nodded. I understand. I will do my best to revive the Rotterdam Kingdom and make the alliance stronger at the same time for the fundamental interests of the people of the Rotterdam Kingdom. After getting Duque's approval, Kalia nodded and bowed gracefully. She then glanced at Elugia and Servanas reluctantly, and left first. Then, Elugia tactfully glanced at Duque, who was a little embarrassed, and the thought-provoking Queen Sylvanas. She smiled. I'll go out first too. You guys haven't seen each other for so long, you should have a good chat. Finally, only Duque and Queen Sylvanas were left in the huge tent. Servanas, on the other hand, was straightforward. He walked up to Duque without any shyness, and put his 2 muscular arms on Duque's shoulders. His 10 strong yet soft fingers hugged Duque's neck from the back of Duque's neck. Today, Queen Sylvanas was still dressed as a ranger. Unfortunately, it was unknown whether it was because of the ritual or something else, but her skin that was usually exposed to the air was covered by a layer of black gauze. Although it was more alluring, after being hugged, it lacked the feeling of skin against skin. Duque asked, with your intelligence, there's no reason you can't figure out that Kalia is a little silly doing this. Queen Sylvanas rolled her eyes. It's okay. I think a girl who gives her heart and soul to you is also very beautiful like this. I may be able to stop you from continuing to give your heart to the world, but I can't stop more women from falling in love with you. Who told me to fall for such an outstanding man? Ah. Duque was a little breathless, because when Queen Sylvanas pretended to fix Duque's collar, she tightened her grip on Duque. Dear Duque, although I don't mind sharing you with other women, because I'm a latecomer myself, it doesn't mean that I'll tolerate your promiscuity indefinitely. I'll forget about the mess you left behind in the past, but in the future, don't give girls magic ice roses or whatnot. Not one girl in this world can resist this kind of romance. Chapter 863. For a moment, Duque froze. Words like capsize kept popping up in his head. However, Queen Sylvanas' attitude made Duque feel a little complicated. There was no such thing as absolute perfection in love. Sometimes, one could be an angel one moment, and the next, a devil. There were things that one liked and things that one disliked. Being willing to tolerate everything about the other was love. If Queen Sylvanas was just a docile vase, Duque could have as many beauties as she wanted in the noble circles of various countries with just a wave of his hand. Queen Sylvanas, on the other hand, was strong, wild, and constantly fighting against fate. She was definitely the ideal partner to accompany Duque to the end in Azeroth. Duque smiled brightly. Just as he tried to put his hands on Queen Sylvanas' flexible and elastic waist, Queen Sylvanas dodged beautifully, and Duque missed. When Duque came back to his senses, he only saw Queen Sylvanas' slender figure standing at the entrance of the tent. Queen Sylvie turned her head and gave him a provocative look. You bastard, your body reeks of Alucia. Before I calm down, go find your Alucia. Duque was dumbfounded. When the beauty disappeared in front of him, he sighed sadly. Damn it, are all the women of the Windrunner family dogs? Queen Sylvanas' words were not only for Duque, but also for Alucia, who was waiting at the door. The uncrowned queen of the South Sea city-state, the Marquess of Stormwind, blushed with shame. No matter what, at least this matter was settled. In fact, the coronation ceremony was more like a political show. The two queens first held the coronation ceremony at the border, and then the official ceremony was held in their respective main cities. Of course, Rotterdam was the holy city of Stratholme. After tomorrow, the country would officially be renamed the Kingdom of Sin Dorii, and the coronation ceremony would be held on the plains to the east of the ruins of the old Silvery Moon City. Just like in the original history, the elves decided to rebuild a new Silvery Moon City here. This was by no means an easy task. The plague had not been completely eradicated, and most of the crops had been destroyed. Sin Dorii, who was unable to feed all of the elves, could only use boats to transport the surviving elves to Windrunner's territory in the southern continent's elven forest. Windrunner's territory, which had been viewed as a traitor by most of the elves in the past, had now become a refuge that could save their lives. This was quite ironic. On the other hand, it showed the importance of working with the Alliance. Without the help of the Alliance, this batch of elves might not even survive. It would be ridiculous if they did not die in the invasion of natural disasters, but died in the famine and plague that followed. Just like that, on the 25th of September in the Dark Portal, the two formerly top-tier northern kingdoms had their empresses enthroned on the same morning, proclaiming the new birth of their kingdoms. The Salus Trail was not a spacious place. However, the huge platform built halfway up the mountain could easily accommodate 5,000 Scarlet Cross warriors and 5,000 elven guards. Similarly, the 5,000 citizens who had been selected from various places were fortunate enough to witness the ceremony, witnessing the kingdom's new hope in their hearts. Queen Kalia Menethil and Queen Sylvanas Windrunner step onto the red carpet. In the south, Queen Kalia was different from everyone's impression. She was not wearing her usual light princess dress. Instead, she was wearing a pure white, gold-rimmed commandment priest robe that was incomparably solemn. She looked solemn, holding the holy book of the Church of Holy Light in her left hand, and the scepter that symbolized Lordaeron's authority in her right. Her soft blonde hair was tied up behind her head as she slowly walked forward. In the north, Queen Sylvanas' clothes had also changed the impression that the elves had of her as an elven ranger in the past. Today, the first thing that caught their eyes was her fiery red cloak. Then, there were 3 layers of red pauldrons with golden edges stacked on top of each other like a sandwich. On the edge of each layer was a row of long, fierce, and lifelike fangs, the fangs that had once been pulled out of the mouths of trolls. Her entire upper body, apart from the pauldrons and the cloak, only had the breastplate that looked like a chest. In the middle of the breastplate, there was a huge golden gem that seemed to be twisting with electricity. It was dazzling. Her lower body was a pair of tight red breeches, matched with a set of leg guards that were also fiery red. If one looked closely, they would find that the leg guards had a large number of elven magic inscriptions that strengthened speed and agility. Coupled with the large bow slung across her back and the quiver filled with sharp arrows that never left her body, she was the complete opposite of Queen Kalia's style. One martial art. However, they also slowly moved forward under the gazes of the honor guards lined up neatly along the red carpet, surrounded by a formation of swords and spears not far away. Sylvanas' steps were obviously bigger, but because of her slower pace, the 2 queens reached the bottom of the throne steps at the same time. Separated by the clearly marked border under their feet, the 2 queens stood across the border. Sylvanas smiled. Together? Kalia nodded. Of course. At the same time, Mograine and Riadaline, who stood at the bottom of the steps on the left and right, shouted at the same time, "Hail to Her Majesty the Queen." The next moment, the holy knights standing on both sides of the red carpet gathered holy light in their bodies at the same time. Clusters of holy light rose like curtains, wrapping the figures of the 2 queens in it. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, they walked up the highest step at the same speed, step by step, step by step. Waiting for them there was Duque in his blue and white formal attire. Before this moment, many people did not know why the young-looking Duque was standing in this sacred position. They were even more indignant that the 2 queens walked to the highest step and knelt on one knee to Duque. "Why should our queen kneel to you, the commander of the alliance?" Until the huckster Duque spread out his right palm, letting a dazzling illusory gold coin, like a small sun, float in the air. Duque's voice echoed throughout the venue. A long time ago in the Dalajan, a Lordaeran missionary threw a copper coin into the fountain pool and made a wish. "I hope that one day I can spread the way of the holy light to the civilians and teach them the meaning of the 3 virtues." Then, throughout his life, he saved countless civilians, and in the battle of the Dark Portal that almost caused the extinction of the humans and the High Elves, he created a brand new profession, the Holy Knight. Until today, the Holy Knights are still in the hands of the evil undead Calamity, protecting every kind being with holy light. Duke paused for a moment, then said the name in an emotional tone. "This great missionary of Lordaeran is the former Archbishop of the Holy Light, His Excellency Alonso's Fail." Chapter 864. Not every clergyman's name would be holy in the hearts of the people. Perhaps Duque was more famous in many fields, but in terms of devotion to the holy light, compassion, salvation of the soul, and saving countless lives, Duque was no match for Alonso's Fail. Almost as soon as Duque mentioned the name, nearly 10,000 people of the Rotterdam Kingdom, apart from the guards who had a mission, all started to kneel. Duque continued, "Without Archbishop Fail's teachings, perhaps countless people in the world would still be on the verge of depravity and corruption, allowing evil to take advantage of them, allowing greed and sin to dominate the souls of the people. Without Archbishop Fail's holy light, we wouldn't even be able to find weapons to fight against the Calamity army." When Duque said that, the elves could not help but recall the scene when Duque and Queen Sylvanas worked together to defeat the evil illusion of the Lich King. They also thought of their loved ones who had their souls imprisoned and their corpses desecrated after being slaughtered by the Calamity army. They thought of the holy light that destroyed evil, and suddenly felt a heartfelt admiration for the name Alonso's Fail, which was once unfamiliar to them. Unknowingly, even the elves started to kneel. At this moment, the golden light from the soul coin had already extended to Duque's entire body. From afar, Duque looked like a huge golden torch. Duque's eyes were smiling, and he said loudly, "I am not a priest. I am not qualified to bestow the holy light with the name of a clergyman. However, as the inheritor of the holy light of the former archbishop, I am still willing to give the highest blessing to the two majesties who hope to guide the people with the path of holy light. Bless you, Your Majesty Menethil. Bless you, Your Majesty Windrunner. In the next moment, dazzling golden light extended from Duke's left and right hands, and even the bodies of the two queens who had stretched out their hands flickered with golden light. 3 seconds later, 2 beams of golden light shot into the sky, straight into the clouds. Their bodies were bathed in the holy light. The two queens smiled at Duque before looking at each other. They took out a crown from the holy box that they had long opened, and put it on themselves. Monarchical power was not bestowed by God, nor was it bestowed by heaven. Instead, it was bestowed by the will of the people. Looking at the golden lily crown on Queen Kalia's head, then looking at the thorny flower crown on Sylvanas's head that symbolized revenge, both humans and elves raised their heads, waiting for their queen's declaration. The two queens stood up at the same time. Kalia was the first to raise the holy book in her hand, and her gentle but firm voice resounded in all directions. I, Kalia Menethil, will purify the land of Lordaeron that has been polluted by the plague, and return everyone a fertile and green world. In the next second, Kalia put away the holy book and raised her scepter. Also, I swear that for the rest of my life, I will punish the traitor who killed the late King Tyrrhenus, my brother Arthas, with the holy light, and let his soul repent for 10,000 years in hell. Almost at the same time, Sylvanas also made her declaration in the Elven language. Because she used the language of the wind, it was very miraculous that even though she and Kalia's declarations were said at the same time, their voices did not affect each other at all. Instead, they were very clear, and directly floated into the ears of every elf. Sylvanas stood on a high ground and raised her bow high up in the air. I, Sylvanas Windrunner, will rebuild the great elven kingdom. Not only will I clear every plague in the kingdom, but I will also rebuild Silvery Moon City. I declare that I will also lead the Sin Dorii, who are seeking revenge for their fallen compatriots, to exact the cruelest revenge on Darken Delethil and the other former members of the Silver Moon Council who betrayed their people, as well as the former Sun King Anastrian Sunstrider, as well as the Death Knight Arthas and the Lich King Zul who personally destroyed Quell, the Loss, only by letting the souls of the traitors burn in the flames of hell for billions of years. Only by letting the great Sin Dorii once again stand at the top of the world's races. Only then will our revival be complete. The same stirring speech, the same unwavering oath. The two queens' declarations completely ignited the passion in the hearts of the people, stirring up the desire in their hearts for the revival of their race and kingdom. After a short pause of half a second, the entire mountaintop erupted into wild cheers that shook the earth and mountains at the same time. Long live Her Majesty Kalia! Long live Her Majesty Sylvanas! For the rise of Lordaeron once again! For the true rebirth of Sin Dorii, whose tears were flying. Whose soul was it that was screaming? Two races that had both experienced countless hardships and the threat of death, at this moment, crossed the boundaries of their borders, crossed the boundaries of their races, and let out the same cheer for the same goal. Because they had been suppressed for so long, they had once felt despair. Because they had once been lost, and could not find a way out. So when the new queen became a flag with both material and spiritual significance, standing in the center of their vision, they completely fell into a frenzy. Mograine and Abendis wiped away their tears. They had found a person who could continue their loyalty. Lilith wiped away her tears. After being oppressed for so long, the Windrunner finally did not have to be bullied for no reason by the stubborn mages. Riadaline, Lor, Themar, and Hadgeron were all wiping away their tears. They finally saw hope for the kingdom to rise again. Perhaps the two kingdoms were still very weak now, but with the cooperation of the alliance, as long as the evil demon leader Archimonde was eliminated, and in time, the kingdom that had once almost fallen to the point of extinction would definitely rise again. Among the guests, the former elven prince Kale, that was also impressively among them. There was no jealousy, no hatred. Kale, that's also wiped away his tears lightly and clapped his hands vigorously. Solarian, Caponia, do you see that? In the face of difficulties, I see pessimism and despair. However, Sylvanas only has the spirit of never giving up, and the direction and method to solve the difficulties. I am not as good as her. I believe that she is the true queen who can lead the elves out of despair and hardship, not me. Although the two beautiful astrologers agreed with what Kale that said from the bottom of their hearts, their mouths were filled with bitterness. Of course, not every being would give the best wishes for the two queens' ascension. For example, the Sun King, who was in the secret chamber under the ruins of Lordaeron, was venting his anger crazily. The dark flames burned any living being that could move. Even the former members of the Silver Moon Council who were loyal to him, and the current high-level liches, kept a respectful distance from him. Traitor! Despicable thief! Sylvanas, do you think you can steal my power and status like this? Do you think you have become a true king just because you proclaimed yourself king? No, I'm not done with you. And Kale, that's, you useless piece of trash, you actually watched as your father's power was stolen. You don't deserve to be my son. Chapter 865. Thousands of kilometers away, Kale, that seemed to sense something and suddenly felt a chill. Carponia asked in concern, what's wrong? Nothing. I was just thinking that my father might be very unhappy to see this. Kale, that smiled bitterly. Although he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible and escape from this political whirlpool, sometimes, he couldn't do it even if he wanted to. Duque also wanted to help him escape, but unfortunately, Lord Themar and the other higher-ups insisted that the official exit of the former king's representative would make Sylvanas' ascension more legitimate. This would certainly embarrass Kale, but the former prince accepted everything calmly. This made Kale, supporters indignant. Looking at the two queens sitting on their thrones on the stage, and Duque sitting between them like stars surrounding the moon, Solarian and the other elven experts felt an indescribable jealousy. Alexandros Mograine and Lor Themar Theron took the stage respectively and read out the policies that the new king would implement after ascending to the throne on behalf of their queens, receiving cheers from the people again and again. The more this happened, the more uncomfortable Kale, supporters felt. The resentment in their hearts was stuck in their chests, and they couldn't vent it. Even Solarian, who was used to seeing the world and felt that she could bear all this mentally, forced herself to come to the venue, felt like she was going crazy. She was extremely glad that the two irascible fellows, Saladre and Segunar, weren't here. Suddenly, an unexpected person approached Kale, He was wearing a hood, but it didn't cover his face. In the cheering crowd, he seemed so out of place. Duque? Unexpectedly, as soon as Duke left the rostrum, the other side came over. Kale, was first stunned, then pleasantly surprised. On such an occasion, it undoubtedly represented a rare and valuable support. There's no need to get up. We'll just sit and talk. Duque smiled. Despite their dissatisfaction, Solarian and Carponia immediately stood up and gave up a chair for Duque. Duke took the responsibility and sat on Kale, right-hand side, allowing the two radiant moon astromancer beauties to serve on his side. Sitting down, Duque spoke again, the feeling of losing glory must be terrible, right? Duque was so straightforward that Caponia almost exploded, but Solarian, who was more composed, held her down. Kale, didn't suppress his emotions and allowed the pain to appear on his handsome face. Yes, I used to think that I could bear all of this, but I realized that my temperament wasn't strong enough to bear such a heavy blow. I'm okay, but I'm afraid my followers will be a little unstable. I won't say any more useless words of encouragement. I just want to say that all intelligent beings in this world will have a battle with Archerons, the commander of the Burning Legion. Duque's words made Kale, suddenly agitated. He gripped the armrest of the chair tightly and turned half of his body around. Duque, you mean? Duque lowered his voice and said in an extremely solemn tone, if that day comes, will you join? When the time comes, I will go, Sylvanas will go, and Mograine will go. But let me say this first. That's Archerons with at least half of his strength. I can't guarantee that anyone, including me, will come back alive. It wasn't just Kale, that's. Even the two beautiful astromancers behind him were so excited that they couldn't stop trembling. All the depression from before and the resentment that was heavy like a mountain had vanished without a trace at this moment. Other than Duque, no one had ever been willing to truly understand the feelings of a group of traitors like them. They still loved their motherland from the bottom of their hearts, longed to save their compatriots from suffering, and were eager to wash away their shame and prove themselves to the world with glory. But there was no chance. They originally thought that going to the door of darkness would be equivalent to being exiled for a few years. At most, they would suffer a few years of disdain, and their situation would be better when they came back. But now, Duque had given them a better shortcut. How could they not be ecstatic? Death? For traitors like them, this was no longer the biggest concern. In the end, it was the more cautious Solarian who bowed deeply to Duque and added, "I have a question. Before I ask, please forgive my narrow-mindedness, Your Excellency Marcus." "Ask, I don't mind." Duque waved his hand. Solarian uncontrollably rubbed her skirt along her thighs. "If Your Highness Kale, that joins us in the expedition against the Arc-Herons, will we have an official identity?" Solarian. Kale, that was a little shocked and angry. He didn't expect his follower to ask such a question. In his imagination, he could be a hired thug. If he was lucky enough to come back alive, and Duque could be merciful and wash away the shame with him, then he would be endlessly grateful. Wasn't Solarian's question a disguised form of blackmail? Duque smiled. "Kale, I've always been like this. If others treat me with sincerity, I will treat them with sincerity. The expedition against a peerless expert like the Arc-Herons is a matter of life and death to begin with. Every member who dares to join the expedition should be respected by the world. Therefore, as long as you join, it must be as an official. And at the expedition ceremony, Kale, you will be among the Alliance's generals. This is my promise." Hiss. The three elves all gasped. They didn't know how to describe their feelings at all. The fall of Cuel Salis and the destruction of Silvermoon City could not be attributed to Duque. Kale, had knelt down out of kinship, so it was hard for him to blame Duque for not coming out earlier. Duque had explained later that he was unable to gain control of the Sunwell branch, and that Duque did not have the capital to fight against the Sun King. After all, there were all kinds of strange things to be blamed. The Sun King could only blame himself for ruthlessly refusing to join the Alliance at the beginning, chasing away the Alliance ambassador, Bolvar, and bowing down to evil in order to continue his existence. But now, Duque had so generously opened the door and given them a chance to redeem themselves. One had to know that for the smooth political transition, as someone close to Servanas, Duque should have nailed Kale, to the pillar of shame instead of trying to whitewash Kale, Unable to suppress the excitement in her heart, Solarian actually knelt down on one knee and spoke in the Elven language. The general meaning of these words was that she had gauged the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure, which was a serious insult to Duque's character. In order to protect Duque's reputation, as long as Kale, could restore his reputation this time, she was willing to work like a slave for Duque. At this moment, Duque was dumbfounded. Chapter 866. If it was in the future where ancient gods were everywhere and demigods were as common as dogs, a radiant moon astromancer might just be a rare elite. However, in this era where the third battle of the Dark Portal had yet to end, it was a little too much to ask a radiant moon astromancer to work for him. Duque instinctively wanted to refuse, but the system notification told him that this was a matter of faction prestige selection. Faction prestige selection was when two opposing forces were fighting. Which one would you choose? Once you chose one side, don't expect the other side to treat you well. The higher your reputation on one side, the more the other side would want to tear you to pieces. Miraculously, when Duque went to find out what the other side was, the system elf told Duque that it was unknown. What a mess. This was the first time Duque had heard of such opposing factions. However, since he had decided to help Kaisi, there was no reason for him to give up halfway. After all, Solarian was a famous boss in the Eye Fortress in the future. At the very least, she had much more room for growth than Alucia. Moreover, when Duque saw Solarian's nervous and uneasy eyes, and thought of the customs of the elves, Duque more or less understood what was going on. Mystics were particular about equivalent exchange. In the Dalagen, exchange was usually in the form of selling one's body to serve the Dalagen for a long period of time. Mage apprentices of low birth would mostly sell their labor and join the Dalagen Mage Guild in order to pay their tuition fees. In the High Elf Society, which was more particular about bloodlines and family inheritance, the price of teaching magic, even if it was just taking them in as a mage apprentice, was usually a lifetime of loyalty to a certain family. Becoming an elf of a certain bloodline meant that one would be marked for life. This was also why the loyal followers of the prince had never thought of changing sides. Duque had originally thought that Sylvanas would become the queen and replace Kaisi, who had been the king for a while in history. Duque had decided to help Kaisi out of a desire to make up for it. Who would have thought that the elves' way of thinking was even more rigid? Solarian wanted to use her status as a radiant moon to help Kale, who was also a radiant moon, have a bright future. Based on the difference in strength, it was the followers who thought they had the advantage. Duque was a little speechless. Kale, that's not good. If this gets out, they'll think that I stole your follower with my power. Unexpectedly, Kale, dropped an even bigger bomb. He also left his seat and bowed deeply to Duque with Caponia. No, actually, Solarian's intention is also my intention. As sinners who betrayed their own people, if they could slightly redeem their reputation and reduce the guilt in their hearts, that would be the greatest redemption for them. If we're lucky enough to survive after fighting the Archherons, I hope you can have me and these elites who have lost their homeland follow you. Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. F***CK. Is this even worse than a chicken on the ground? Although I also know that in history, you were betrayed by your loved ones, forced into madness and despair, and even nailed to the pillar of shame with your subordinates, but you, a dignified former prince, becoming my subordinate like this. It's not good. Speaking of which, if I bring you out, of course it'll be cool. Ugh, tui tui. Duque was very embarrassed. But at this time, it wasn't just Kale and his servants who bowed to him. Even the few high elves in the VIP seats bowed to Duque. These old elves weren't strong, but they represented several ancient families. They also helped to plead with Duque, Kale, that's made a big mistake, but considering that he did it out of kinship, we can still understand. It would be a pity if a kind and responsible genius like him died in disgrace. Since Sir Marcus has this idea, after Kale, proves himself, you might as well accept them as followers. Under everyone's persuasion, Duque could only reluctantly say that everything would have to wait until after the sniping of Archimonde. Duque was waiting for news from the other side of the endless sea. Not only did he have to wait for news from Ronan, but he also had to wait for news from Jaina and even from the orcs. Everything needed time to ferment, and it couldn't be rushed. In the following days, because he knew that the Scourge army was no longer led by the Lich King and Arthas, Duque was at ease and let the Alliance organize a few large-scale attacks. Unfortunately, it wasn't complete. Because the entire Silverpine forest was filled with endless werewolves, they didn't dare to rashly attack the Alterac Mountains, and they couldn't deal with the zombies at the bottom of Lordemir Lake. The southern front was almost at a standstill. But with Lothar's Griffin Legion, Old General Haas's Mountain Eagle Knights, and Bulang Bronzebeard's Mechanized Dwarven Legion, a total of 150,000 soldiers, the defense was stable. Duque gathered his army in the eastern Plague Lands, and took advantage of the last opportunity before winter to launch a fierce attack on the western Plague Lands. This was a grand attack that gathered all the elite troops that Duque could muster, Mograine and Abendis's Scarlet Cross Legion, which had 150,000 soldiers after expansion. Saidan Dathrahan's 60,000 Stratholme troops. Turayan's 50,000 Dark Portal troops. Windsor's 40,000 private corps of the Marcus family. Magni's mechanized tank army with more than 3,000 dwarven steam tanks, as well as 5,000 cannons of various sizes, and a total force of 80,000 dwarves and gnomes. Kudrin Wildhammer's 4,000 griffin knights. Cervanus's 20,000 rangers and mages mixed army. Duque personally led more than 10,000 mages and more than 30,000 Dalajan infantry mages. In addition to the militias organized by the people of Lord Emir, the total force was 800,000, and they pressed against the Scourge army. Throughout the month of October, the Dreadlords sent nearly 10 million undead creatures into the western Plague Lands, which was surrounded by mountains. From the newly invented abominations that were more than 3 meters tall, and were stitched together by many rotten corpses, to the zombie dogs that were resurrected from some unknown ravine, from the sky to the ground, they fought with the Alliance in almost every inch of the western Plague Lands. But with Duque's endless targeted tactics and the Alliance's gradual advance, the western Plague Lands were finally recovered by the Alliance on the 30th of October. From the northernmost Hearth Valley to the southernmost Cold Wind Camp, from the westernmost Undead Barrier, to the easternmost Sodero River, all the Scourge undead were swept away. If it wasn't for the Dreadlords forcing Anastrian, Kel, Thuzad and Arthas to defend the newly built, Undead Barrier, the Alliance might have been able to enter the Tirisful Glades and take down Lord Emir. Chapter 867. However, this is the best we can do for now. Looking at the Undead Barrier in the distance, Duque could not help but sigh. Duque, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You've done well. I thank you on behalf of the people of Rotterdam, said Mograine, who was beside Duque. Duque waved his hand. Hurry up and act according to the arrangements made in the military conference. After the first snowfall, the road conditions will get worse. Understood. Mograine retreated. Between the Tirisful woodland, where Rotterdam was located, and the western Plague Lands, there was a huge mountain range that towered into the clouds. It was a natural barrier that even the Calamity army, whose core was the undead, could not easily cross. Ordinary ghouls and zombies could not cross it at all, unless they were high-level troops such as gargoyles and bone dragons. When winter came, whether they wanted it or not, they could only call a truce. How the 800,000 troops would survive the winter was a huge problem to begin with. From the beginning, Duque did not put so many troops into the western Plague Lands, especially the poorly trained militia. They were all sent to logistics by Duque. Since there were skeletons and zombies all over the place, they had enough to do. After defeating a counterattack organized by the Dreadlord Mal Gannis in mid-October, Duque let Turalian and Reginald Windsor lead a detachment from the western Plague Lands to the south to build Coldwind Camp and open up the Icewind Mound and Sophia Highlands. That way, the Alliance would have a safe passage along the river that flowed out of Lake Daramir, connecting the north and south battlefronts. Even when they reached the Undead Barrier, Duque did not call back Turalian and Windsor's troops. The Undead Barrier was too narrow, and there was no need for so many soldiers. Leaving too many people there would only increase the logistical pressure. Now, the Alliance's attack on the entire Rotterdam continent was basically supported by food reserves. Without Stratholme, which had millions of tons of food reserves, it would be impossible to support the attack of hundreds of thousands of people with just the South Sea city-state and shipping. Even though Duke had been missing for 10 years, he still took the initiative to protect Stratholme. This was also the reason why he had protected Stratholme. Duque wasn't a reckless person. Seeing that the Undead Barrier couldn't be breached, he also made plans for winter. The poorly trained Stratholme army and all the militia were pulled back to the vicinity of Stratholme. Most of the dwarves' Griffin Legion and mechanized troops had also withdrawn. Tanks were used for assault, and it was too wasteful to leave them for defense. All kinds of artillery were enough. Other than building a semi-permanent fortress on the west side of the Fellstone farm to the east of the Spectral Rampart, Duque had also sent 50,000 men from the Scarlet Cross to rebuild Hearth Valley and the North Mountain Sawmill. There was a reason why the Argent Northern Expedition was able to hold out for so long in Hearthglen. If they could not defend the Western Plague Lands in the future, Hearth Valley could be used as a nail to disgust the Doomsday Army. Not far away, Duque looked at Queen Sylvanas, who was still training her rangers. Suddenly, he made a malicious guess. Now that Queen Sylvanas had become a living and fragrant Sylvanas, would there be more forgotten ones in the future? Similarly, if the Blood Elves joined the alliance, there would be nothing left for the Horde, right? In November, because Jaina had finally established a foothold in Theramore and built a huge magic communication circle, Duque finally received news from the other side of the Endless Sea. When the first news came, Duque felt that the wheel of history was still rolling forward, unhindered by anything. That was in September. Even if they found the right ocean current, after a month of sea voyage, the strong tribal warriors were still tortured to the point that they were barely alive. When Thrall saw the older orcs looking at the red desolate land and calling it home, he was a little puzzled. Grom patted Thrall's shoulder and grinned. Before we passed through the dark portal to Azeroth, our world was like this. Desolate, harsh, but vast plains, there was never a lack of danger and huge prey that could feed over 100 people for a week. Only the most fearless warriors and the most powerful hunters could survive on the land. This is the orcs. Yes. This was the orcs. Unyielding. The orcs that could always survive in the harshest of environments. The Horde's crewed transport ship docked, and the orcs happily rushed to the shore. The wildest ones were already fighting with the giant wave crabs on the shore. Some of the unlucky ones had their fingers pinched off by the wave crab's huge pincers, but the orcs were laughing. That's right. Hunting. Hunting was the orcs' instinct. Hunting was the orcs' glory. Bleeding for instinct and glory was worth it. Grom Hellhound roared and shouted, "Yo! Our great chief! Give this land of the orcs' revival a name." Thrall couldn't suppress the excitement in his chest and shouted a name, Durotor. Grom understood immediately. Durotor was a homonym for Durotor in the orc language. Thrall was using this method to commemorate his father, who he had never met, who sacrificed himself to protect him and the Horde. For a moment, the old orc's eyes were a little wet. 3 days later, the new Horde made the decision to build a new main orc city in a place with good feng shui on the west side of the river and the back of the mountains. In order to commemorate the brave and wise former great chief Orgrim, this new orc city will be named Orgrim. In the following period of time, Thrall, the blessed leader of the Horde, met the Tauren chief Cairn Bloodhoof on his way to find the prophet. The Horde began to receive help from the Tauren tribe. Then, at the beginning of October, a troll tribe also crossed the ocean and migrated to Durotor. It was Wajin's Darkspear tribe. Wajin succeeded his father, Sinjin, and became the new leader of the Darkspear trolls. Like the other trolls of the Darkspear tribe, he used to live in Stranglethorn Vale in the south of the Eastern Kingdom. Because of Durotor's strategy, Stormwind expanded southward. Coupled with the encirclement of the trolls in Zul Gurub who believed in the blood god Hacker, the Darkspear trolls had no choice but to leave their hometown. Now, there were only a few troll towns and a vast jungle. Not long after Wajin and his tribe arrived in Kalimdor, they were attacked by the Murlocs near Durotor. If it wasn't for Thrall's help, perhaps Wajin and his Darkspear tribe would have disappeared long ago. At this time, Wajin's gratitude was beyond words. He and the forest trolls swore to serve the Horde and form an eternal alliance. Chapter 868. It was October, and the weather was getting cold. Near Orgrimmar, Thrall looked at his tribesmen who had hunted down a large number of velociraptors and hung the dragon meat on wooden racks. Thrall, on the other hand, frowned. Durotor was not bad. Although it was a bit desolate, there was no lack of prey, which was enough for the beastmen to reproduce. The problem was that Durotor lacked wood because of its desolation. Thrall was fortunate enough to see the humans use a magical building material called cement. He had heard more than once from the beastmen's seniors about how perfect and hard this so-called cement was. It was already fortunate that the humans spared the orcs because of those damned undead creatures. Thrall did not expect Duque to be kind enough to send cement to the beastmen and support the construction of Orgrimmar. Unfortunately, the beastmen craftsmen in this westward migration team only knew how to build houses made of wood and bricks. These craftsmen, who used to be beastmen laborers, told Thrall that with their current technology, they could not build houses that were more than 2 stories tall and thick enough. The same went for the city walls. After hearing about the terrifying firepower of the dwarves, Thrall decided that Orgrimmar also needed a city wall that could withstand the bombardment of those crude cannons. Once again, the problem returned to the original point. To shape the city walls, the beast men still needed a large amount of good wood. Thrall called Grom Hellroar. Grom, the Horde needs your and your tribesmen's services. Speak. I'll do it. Grom, who had recently eaten a lot and was carrying Hellroar, looked very energetic. The Horde needs a large amount of good wood to build a city and a city wall. Unfortunately, the west of Duroder is a terrible place. The Barren Lands, right? That's a terrible and fitting name. Grom curled his lips. The Horde scouts are already more than a week's walk away from Duroder. The south of the Barren Lands is also a terrible place with few trees. The Stonetolan Mountains to the west aren't much better. The only place with enough wood is the Grey Valley to the north of the Barren Lands. What's wrong there? I don't know. Maybe it's some intelligent race, or some large groups of beasts. Anyway, none of the scouts who went into the forest in the Grey Valley returned. This gives me a bad feeling. Sal frowned. He actually had an ominous premonition. Unfortunately, the new tribe urgently needed a large amount of good wood. What do you want the Warsong clan to do? Take your men and 5,000 orc carpenters with you. Try your best not to offend the natives of Grey Valley and bring back enough wood. That's about the amount that 5,000 people can carry back. That's about it. No problem. Grom whistled and walked out of the tent. Wait. Grom. Thrall called out to the tribal hero. What? Grom stopped. The tribe is too weak now. If possible, try not to clash with the large intelligent races on this continent. Grom smiled, his fangs glinting coldly. It's fine. No one is my blood roar opponent. The bad premonition in Sal's heart grew stronger, but he didn't have another organized army with enough people to use. He was quite at ease with Lexer, but unfortunately, Lexer was a lone ranger. Woking was also not bad, but the problem was that the Darkspear clan had too few people. Thrall had no choice. What the Horde didn't know was that less than 500 kilometers south of Duroder's southernmost cliffs, on a place called Thurmore Island, Jaina's Alliance expeditionary force had also gained a foothold. Moreover, the construction on Thurmore Island was much faster than that of the Horde's Orgrimmar. In the center of the island, a huge 5-story mage tower had already risen from the ground. It's hard to imagine that such a large building only took us a week. The rest of the week was spent waiting for the cement to completely dry. Jaina sighed as she looked at the mage tower. That's right. Advisor Aegwin agreed. This wasn't the first time Jaina had seen a country bumpkin with cement. But no matter how many times she saw this magical building material, it was still amazing. As long as the craftsman marked the location of the piles on the ground, Jaina would even personally use magic to blast holes in the ground in order to save time. When the craftsman inserted steel bars into the long and straight deep holes blasted with arcane magic and poured in the mix of cement, the foundation was ready in just 3 days. Then it was time to erect the piles and pour the cement into the molds. As for the cooling of the cement, this was never a problem. For her new residence, Jaina did not hesitate to personally use frost magic to cool the cement quickly and evenly. So in just a week, a miraculous mage tower stood in the center of the island. If Duque was here, he would definitely praise Jaina for being self-taught. In the history before Duke's transmigration, when the Americans were building the famous Hoover Dam back then, in order to speed up the work and to cool all parts of the reinforced concrete structure that weighed more than 100 tons at the same time, after the modeling was completed and the cement was poured, liquid nitrogen was poured to cool it directly. Now, Jaina used magic to complete all of this. Looking at the little kingdom of her dreams changing day by day, listening to the cheers of the people who came across the ocean to seek refuge, Jaina's heart was filled with satisfaction. The only thing that made Jaina extremely conflicted was that she seemed to be a bit unworthy of the title of Queen of Theramore. There were too many places where Duque's shadow could be seen. Without the cement and the Marcus family's construction team, she might have had to live in a terrible tent for a month after arriving. This was very difficult for Jaina, who was born as a princess. After all, Theramore Island was half surrounded by the dust swamp. Since it was a swamp, and a swamp in the middle of summer in August and September, what was the most abundant? Mosquitoes. Not everyone could run around with an ice shield like Jaina. The mosquitoes that filled the sky and the ground were annoying to see from afar. However, the powerful mosquito repellent provided by the Marcus Chamber of Commerce for free, the Pa X-rays to kill mosquitoes, and the screen windows very considerately solved most of Jaina's problems. Moreover, the extremely insane new method of reclamation made the entire Theramore Island have no so-called blind spots from the beginning of the construction of the city. Not to mention, Duque shipped a large batch of magic materials from the Dalajan and Kuel Salis to the ship. What was it for? To directly make magic defense inscriptions for the walls of Theramore Island that were about to be built. Jaina held her forehead. I always feel like I'm like a kite. When that bastard Duque wants me to go back, he can just retract the line. Chapter 869. This was not an illusion. If the fleet at her disposal could send 10,000 people across the ocean to Theramore, it would be amazing. If Lordaeron was ravaged by natural disasters, she would have to learn from Duque during the first battle at the Dark Portal. She would first send people to a small island not far from the mainland, and then send them across the sea in batches. Now, she was supported by the entire Stormwind Navy, Kurtira's Fourth Fleet, and Marcus Merchant Fleet. In total, there were more than 1,500 ships of various sizes. 100,000 refugees, more than 15,000 Theramore soldiers, and more than 20,000 tons of all kinds of supplies, were all transported here in a magnificent manner. 10 years ago, the galleons with 4 or even 5 masts had become the mainstream of the Eastern Kingdom. Whether in terms of speed or maneuverability, these new ships were far superior to the Horde's old ships. Jaina's fleet, which set off 2 weeks later than the Horde, arrived at Kalandor almost at the same time as the Horde. Coupled with the magic of cement, the Theramore Expeditionary Force established itself faster than the Horde. If one did not know better, they would think that Duque had deliberately dug a pit for the Horde to jump into. When the fleet had finished unloading, Vice Admiral Jessie Farivel came to ask Jaina if they could return. If this sturdy female general could be bribed, Jaina might not mind doing so. Unfortunately, Jessie was Duque's subordinate, and after nearly 15 years of assimilation, the famous Bloodsail pirate squadron commander had long since become Duque's loyal follower. Ruthless and abiding by orders, Jessie was definitely a general that all high-ranking people liked. It's fine here. I will set up a magic teleportation circle as soon as possible to maintain contact with the Alliance. Go back, and send my regards to Lord Marcus. After sending Jessie away, Jaina sat on the top floor of the newly built Mage Tower, looking down at Theramore, which looked like a super-large construction site, and the coastline covered with tents. She then looked at the large pile of Swamp Survival Handbook, personally written by Duque in the room, and suddenly sighed. Damn it, is that guy Duque really a prophet? He thinks of everything. I don't feel any sense of challenge. Aegwyn teased her from the side. Have you finally realized what kind of opponent you'd be facing if you were to fight? Jaina shrugged. 2 months ago, I wanted to be a good Mrs. Marcus. He. Aegwyn was non-committal. All right. Now it's time to greet the tribe. A cold glint flashed in Jaina's eyes. The next second, when Aegwyn wanted to remind her, she controlled her emotions very well. I know what to do. I came for peace and cooperation. Before the Alliance and the Horde have irreconcilable conflicts, I will be a good pioneer and Alliance ambassador. Aegwyn nodded. It's good that you know. After all, the difference between the Alliance and the Horde was too big. Since humans and orcs were once mortal enemies. Now, the elves and the trolls had thousands of years of grudges between them. If the Scourge army was still around, perhaps the Alliance and the Horde would temporarily work together under the pressure. Once there's no external help, I'm afraid. Jaina walked to the window and stared at the north. I know what to do. If necessary, I'll use some magic tricks that the orcs can't understand. Time passed. Less than a week after Sal sent Grom's Warsong clan north to Grey Valley, he was surprised to receive a message. The Alliance's messenger had come to visit. Sal's heart stopped beating for a moment. The first thing that came to his mind was Duque's prophetic eyes that seemed to be able to see through the future. He tilted his head and asked Woken, "What do you think?" Although it was still a short time, Sal was already very fond of listening to Woken's opinion. The orcs were a brave race, and there was never a lack of brave warriors among the orcs. Unfortunately, the more brave a warrior was, the less good a manager or a good leader. When he was really with his own people, Sal really understood why Orgrim valued him so much. There were too few people with great wisdom among the orcs, and too many people with a one-track mind. The appearance of Woken, who was wise and knew how to judge the situation, made up for the lack of wisdom in the tribe to a large extent. Now in the tribe, Woken's position had unknowingly ranked below Grom and Varrock Salufar. He was ranked fourth, even above the Tauren chief Cairn Bloodhoof. In response to Sal's question, Woken sorted out his thoughts and replied, "According to what you said, the Alliance is also troubled by the terrifying army of the dead, the Scourge army, and is even on the verge of collapse. If this is the case, the Alliance's messenger should not be here to declare war. We will only know the specifics when we meet them. Right now, we also lack information about the Lordaeron continent." Woken paused for a moment. "However, let Sir Salufar go to prepare for war, just in case." Sal nodded, and Varrock immediately understood and went to prepare the army. Varrock and Brock were brothers. These two powerful orc warriors from the Blackrock clan had never been defeated on the battlefield. Of course, this might have something to do with the fact that they had not yet faced the strongest paladins of the Alliance. Unlike Brock, who was only strong as a single soldier, Varrock was more talented in leadership. Varrock, who was also known as King Salufar, had been serving the Horde ever since he drank the blood of Manaroth with Grom Hellscream. He led the Horde to surround Shotrath and Stormwind City, and until the end of the Second War, he had never been defeated. In the First War, when Orgrim Doomhammer led the Horde, he saw Salufar's efficiency and cruelty on the battlefield, and appointed Salufar as his general. Rumor had it that Salufar had once waved his hand, and cut 3 human knights in half horizontally. After Orgrim died at Urthes's hands, Thrall promoted Varrock. Now, Varrock could be said to be the chieftain of the small Blackrock clan. The meeting with the Alliance's messenger was at a large construction site in Orgrimmar. Although Woken advised Sal that it was not good to let the Alliance see through the Horde, Sal shook his head and refused. Orgrim is such a huge city, it is impossible to hide. In that case, why not show the Alliance how magnificent the new city that is about to become the center of the Horde is? Just like that, surrounded by 5,000 orc warriors, Sal welcomed a woman who should have been entangled with his fate, the Alliance's ambassador, Jaina Proudmoore. Chapter 870. In the eyes of most orcs, they looked down on human women. With such a slender waist, wouldn't it be broken in 2 hits? With such a small butt, it would pierce his flesh in a few hits. Her breasts were not much bigger than a pear. Ah, she must have no milk when giving birth. This Alliance messenger Jaina was really ugly. Feeling the disdain from his own orc guards, and even an orc who called Jaina an ugly woman at a volume of 100 decibels, Sal's eyebrows kept twitching. Sigh, the difference in aesthetics brought about by different races and styles was unbearable. As someone who had grown up among humans, Sal had completely accepted the aesthetics of humans. Like any adult male, he was shocked by Jaina's soul-stirring beauty. Back then, when Orgrim had stolen him from Gohalton Castle and sent him to Brill, Sal was still a slave gladiator. When he was growing up, it was as if fate had coincided. He met a servant who had immigrated from Hillsbrad. The servant had a daughter named Taretha Foxton. She was a little girl who had never seen war with her own eyes. Because of the death of her own brother, she projected Sal, who had been taken care of by her parents, as a substitute for her brother. She was not afraid of this green-skinned orc at all. She often taught Sal, who knew nothing about human society, many things in private. She secretly gave all kinds of books to Sal to read without his master's knowledge, and secretly exchanged letters with Sal for many years. Teretha's behavior was not only like a kind mother, but also like a good sister who took care of her brother. She cultivated Sal to be a good leader who was both tolerant and dignified. Even though Sal had been separated from Teresha when he broke free from Briar's cage, at this moment, for some reason, he felt that Teresha's voice and appearance overlapped with this female emissary of the Alliance in front of him. Sal sat on the rough chief's throne, opened his arms, and spoke in the common human language with a Lordaeran accent. "Hello. Messenger of the Alliance, I am the current chief of the tribe, Sal. May I have the honor of knowing your name?" "Beautiful lady." To everyone's surprise, Jaina bowed slightly and replied in the Blackrock tribe's Orc language, "Good day to you, strong great chief Sar. I am Princess Courtiers of the Human Kingdom, leader of the Kalimdor Pioneers and Alliance Ambassador Jaina Proudmoore." Almost all the Orc guards became excited when they heard this. Proudmoore. A ferocious family name second only to Marcus among the older generation of beastmen. The old warriors who had experienced the second battle of the Dark Portal might not understand why Duque was the mastermind, but they definitely knew that the fleet that buried hundreds of thousands of elite orcs was the fleet of a man named Proudmoore. Not only that, but this woman also claimed to be the pioneer of Kalimdor. Did this mean that the despicable humans had tricked them out of the human territory, and now they wanted to take over this barren land that the orcs regarded as their own backyard? The orcs were clamoring. However, as Sal suddenly raised his hand, all 5,000 beastmen instantly fell silent. Even though many of the green-skinned beastmen were red in the face, no one dared to make a fuss or attack Jaina. Even Jaina, who was used to seeing the elites of the Alliance, was secretly shocked that Ling Xing's actions had reached such a level. Sal's voice sounded again. This time, he spoke in the Orc language, although I would like to say, welcome, the word, welcome, has always been reserved for our own people and friends. I just don't know if the emissary's intention is war or peace. Jaina shook her head slowly. Chief Sal, Brill, where you grew up, is still a paradise for the undead until I speak to you. The war has not ended, but it is not a war between the Alliance and the Horde, but a war between the living and the dead. If the silence just now was the silence of people panting and suppressing their anger, then the current silence had evolved into absolute silence. Almost every orc sucked in a breath of cold air. From the slightly stifling battle in Dalaran's territory to the continuous stream of injured orcs turning into ashen undying beasts, the Undying Realm. Every orc present had experienced the horror of the undead army. Even on the ships that came here, there were still some orcs who concealed their injuries and turned into undead along the way, harming their own compatriots. There were a total of 13 ships that, because the captains were soft-hearted or careless, didn't control the undead well or disinfect them, and as a result, these ships all turned into ghost ships floating on the endless sea. Sal and Wajin looked at each other and then nodded to Varrock, who was leading the army. He stood up and raised the Hammer of Destruction, to announce to the orcs, for the time being, the grievances between the Alliance and the Horde will be put aside. In order to let the dead rest in peace and let the living continue to have the right to live, I declare that the Alliance emissary is a friend of the Horde. Everyone, dismiss. The Horde's 5,000 orc army dispersed in an uproar. This allowed Jaina's heart to relax a little. Woken made an inviting gesture and led Jaina to follow behind Sal into the great chieftain's tent, which was as tall as 3 people. Sal sat down on the most gorgeous velociraptor skin in the tent. When he invited Jaina to sit down, Jaina didn't hide her disgust. With a flick of her finger, a chair made of pure ice suddenly appeared under Jaina's buttocks. Stopping the guard, Sal frowned slightly. Lord Proudmoore is a mage. Yes. Radiant Moon. Although he didn't understand why Duque sent such a mage and princess as an emissary, this couldn't stop Sal's curiosity about Jaina and the current situation of the alliance. Sal, who couldn't know the situation on the other side of the sea, was now at a loss. He hoped to meet a more immature diplomatic emissary than him, which would give him more initiative in the following negotiations. Sal was indeed very smart, and he had also seen the human world. Unfortunately, many things in the world were not equal. He had been in Lordaeron for a long time, so he couldn't understand how advanced the technology in the southern part of the continent was. Also, because of the unequal intelligence, he couldn't judge the intention of Jaina's next words. After all, Sal was only a 15-year-old boy. No matter how talented he was, there was still a huge gap in experience between him and Jaina. If Orgrim was still there, it would be better. Unfortunately, the only advisor around him was Wajin, who also knew little about human society. At this point in time, although Wajin was wise, he was just a country bumpkin who had just escaped from the jungle of Stranglethorn Vale. When Jaina spoke, Sal and the others were perfectly led. Chapter 871. A truly outstanding lie that could deceive people would be 90% true and 10% false. As long as the most critical point could be deceived, it would be considered a real success. Jaina portrayed herself as a half-baked pioneer who relied on her powerful magic to climb to a high position, befitting her noble identity. In the following conversation, she revealed the predicament of the alliance, intentionally or unintentionally. Although I don't want to admit it, I have to be honest. The alliance is in the biggest crisis since its establishment. The capital of Lordaeron, the leader of the alliance, has fallen because of the rebellion of the fallen prince. The current situation is that the king of Lordaeron has been killed, and 2/3 of the territory has fallen into the plague. The Dalajan has been destroyed, and Antonidas has been captured and turned into a great lich. The Stormguard king Galan Trollbane has been turned into an immortal, and Gilnis has been defeated, and was forced to release endless werewolves from the Emerald Dream. If Jaina deliberately leaked the information, it would undoubtedly be extremely stupid to expose one's own weakness on a diplomatic level. A weak alliance would undoubtedly weaken one's bargaining chips in negotiations. On the other hand, it could also be used as a warning to the enemy. Lordaeron, Dalajan, Stormguard, and Gilnis were all countries that had dealt a heavy blow to the Horde during the previous battle at the Dark Portal. The bravery of the soldiers of these countries was still deeply imprinted in the hearts of many of the older orcs. However, such powerful countries had all been destroyed. One could imagine how ferocious the Calamity army was. In the imagination of the orcs, the fall of the capital, the death of the king, or the death of the king, was definitely a state of annihilation. The intuition of the orcs was amazing. Coupled with the mysterious shaman witchcraft, if Jaina were to lie, Thrall would see through her at any moment. When that happened, it would not be fun. However, every word and situation that Jaina said was the truth, which made it seem like the other things that Jaina said were more like arguments to boost her morale. For example, but we are not afraid. We still have the strongest commander of the alliance, Duke Marcus. He and the Stormwind army led by Sir Lothar, together with the tanks of the Iron Furnace Fort. A total of 200,000 troops are landing in Southshore. We will definitely recover the entire Lordaeron continent. Was Thrall worried about Duque? Of course. However, at this moment, Azeroth, the best actress of the year, Jaina, had already led Sal and the rest into a trap. How could Sal possibly know that the situation in Rotterdam was actually far from what they had imagined? The next scene was even more exciting. Just as Jaina was complaining, Varrock came in and said, "Great Chief, a human guard insists on interrupting your meeting with the Alliance emissary. He wants to inform the Alliance emissary directly." Sal said, "Let him in." An Alliance guard was led into the tent by Varrock. He hurriedly whispered something to Jaina. Jaina shuddered and gritted her teeth, as if she had decided to confess. The latest news is that the Scourge used the traitors of the Silver Moon Council to attack Kuel Salis with the teleportation circle. Now that Silvery Moon City has been destroyed, Breaking Dawn Archmage Anastrian Sunstrider, the king of Kuel Salus, has joined the Scourge army and become a great lich. In the end, Jaina added, I already knew that the Doomsday army had their eyes on the High Elves. I just didn't expect it to be like this. Jaina's bitter and embarrassed look made the young Sal's heart soften. At this time, Jaina said, it is precisely because we are worried that the situation in Lordaeron will collapse. If we do not handle it well, even Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle in the south will not be able to defend. So Commander Marcus sent me to lead a group of refugees to the west to cross the Endless Sea and build a refuge in Kalimdor. This time, I came to ask the tribe to temporarily not attack the refuge built by the Alliance on Thermore Island for the sake of us all living beings. As soon as this sentence came out, Sal, Wajin, and other tribal leaders suddenly had a sense of resonance with the people who had fallen into the same predicament. It turned out that the once incomparably powerful Alliance had fallen to this point. For a moment, even Sal and the others felt their hearts sink. After Jaina put out a lot of useless non-aggression treaties between the Alliance and the tribe, Sal politely asked Jaina to go and rest first. Then, of course, it was a closed-door meeting of the tribe leaders. Sal spoke first. What do you think of the proposal of the Alliance this time? Varrock Seraphar gestured at the rough map in the big tent. The current map in the tribe's hands was so rough that there was no shadow, only a scribbled coastline and a few general areas. Except for Duroder, which was a little clear, the barren land in the west, the Stonetolan Mountains in the west, and the Dustwallow Swamp in the south were all blurred. Varrock gestured for a long time, but still frowned and said, too close. Yes, Thermore was too close to the tribe's new capital. It was like a sharp dagger hanging around the tribe's neck. In case the Alliance went to war with the Horde, the Alliance's fleet could sweep the entire east coast of Duroder and the Echo Islands where the trolls lived within 3 days. Sal did not speak, he looked at Wajin. The troll leader said, as an emissary, she must have a lot to hide. But everyone will have their own secrets in their heart. My intuition tells me that every word she said is true. Varrock nodded, I also think it is true. We have all seen how terrifying that damn undead legion is. It is not unusual to have such a result. Sal sighed, then we have a conclusion. Let's accept this alliance for the time being. In case something goes wrong in the future. Let's destroy Theramore's alliance first, don't give the alliance a bridgehead to step into Kalimdor. Half a day later, Jaina returned to Theramore with a 5-year non-aggression treaty between the alliance and the Horde. When she returned, she found that the magic communication array with the Eastern Kingdom had been set up, so she sent the message back, along with what she had seen and heard. In her bedroom, Jaina used a basin placed in the middle of the room to wash her feet while humming happily, "Humph. Let me develop with peace of mind and nail Theramore to the Kalimdor continent. Stupid orcs. You dirty green-skinned creatures are only worthy of drinking the princess's foot-washing water." At this time, a sudden voice came, well, you did a good job this time. Sal really should drink your foot-washing water. The voice almost scared Jaina to the ground. Chapter 872. No one could easily pass through a Radiant Moon Mage's perception and sneak into her mage tower, even if it was an incomplete mage tower, unless they were much, much stronger than the Radiant Moon Mage. When Jaina looked over, she was furious. Duque, you bastard. Why are you here? At least knock on the door. Why did you barge in? At this moment, Jaina's clothes were still very tidy. Her upper body was still that silver breastplate, but her robe was lifted, revealing 2 plump white thighs. She was just washing her feet. Was this exposure? Duque didn't think so. Although it was pleasing to the eye, Jaina felt that Duque was invading her privacy. A few arcane missiles hit Duque's face, the magic shield in front of him. Jaina obviously knew that it was useless, but she had to vent her anger. Sometimes, Duque really didn't understand women. Why did Azeroth women like to wear 3-point armor? It didn't matter if a large part of their skin was exposed to the air, but she got so excited just seeing her thighs under her robe. Why did Alucia get so passionate when she was playing human alchemy with him, and then chase him out after changing clothes. Well, men probably wouldn't understand this kind of thing about modesty for the rest of their lives. Duque, this idiot, actually added fuel to the fire at this time. Didn't you say last time that you could let me take a treasure that you've preserved for 27 years at any time? Why is it like this just looking at your feet, you bastard? I've changed my mind. If you have the ability to bring me the title of Lady Marcus, I'll give you my treasure immediately. Jaina showed her power, and this time she started throwing big fireballs. Duque had no choice but to bitterly be a target, using his magic shield until Jaina calmed down. After a while. Have you calmed down? No. Jaina gritted her teeth. Oh. Then continue. Damn it. Duke, come here and let me bite your arm. Swear that you won't enter my Magus Tower without my permission again, and we'll call it even. Are you a dog? Duque replied timidly. Are you coming over? If you dare to run away this time, I'll abandon Theramore and go back to the Eastern Kingdom to tell everyone that you've abandoned me. Jaina gave an ultimatum. Duque gritted his teeth, resigned himself to his fate, swore an oath, and extended his hand. Ah, it was a heart-wrenching howl. Who was it that was screaming in the silent wizard tower? In the end, was it a tragedy of human relations? Or was it a terrifying supernatural phenomenon? Please listen, poo poo poo. When Duque came back to his senses, he felt that it was really painful. What happened next left Duque scratching his head in confusion. Jaina did bite, and when she let go, a deep but small bite mark was left. One moment, Duque was on the verge of tears, and the next moment, Jaina quickly applied the red healing holy water produced by Stratholme on Duque. Seeing Jaina treat his wound with great care, and even licked away the few drops of red medicine that flowed out with her small tongue, the shameless Duque suddenly felt that Jaina was actually quite sexy. Sensing that the atmosphere had become ambiguous, Jaina acted like a dead pig unafraid of boiling water. What, you're finally moved by me? I really don't understand why you've been avoiding me for the past 10 years. Alright, it's too late now. You're already the queen's husband, and no matter who you marry, Curtilas won't be able to handle it. We won't have a future together. Duque was embarrassed. This was the downside of magical communication. She was too well informed. Sensing that the atmosphere had cooled, Duque did not continue playing with fire. He began to ask Jaina about the details of the mission. After that, Jaina asked, you wanted me to build a bridgehead and balance the relationship with the Horde, and I did it. What's next? I don't know why Archimonde hasn't come to Kalimdor for so long. But once he comes, the war over the Well of Eternity will be unavoidable. When that time comes, the opportunity for the Night Elves, the Alliance, and the Horde to unite will appear. Jaina suddenly asked, are you confident that you can deal with Archimonde? If it's just the Alliance, about 30%, and the price will be the destruction of all the Alliance's elite troops. Jaina was very smart, and she immediately sensed what Duque was thinking. It wasn't that the Alliance couldn't fight the Burning Legion alone, but the price would be too high. If the Alliance really sacrificed everything for the world of Azeroth, it would be the rise of the Horde, and the destruction of the humans, elves, and dwarves. Duque was doing this because he wanted to shoulder the burden and dig a pit together. Her mission this time was actually a covert move against the Horde. At the very least, it would force the Horde to go all out. When the time came to face the Burning Legion, who would survive would depend on their own abilities. Jaina was silent for a while, then changed the topic. Senior brother Ronan, I've already sent a ship to Azhara. As long as he's not too unlucky, with the strength of him, Lilith, and that Miss Abendis, it shouldn't be too big of a problem for them to contact the legendary Night Elves. Duque said in a low voice, alright, now we just have to wait for the opportunity to join forces. Do we wait for Archimonde to come? No. If we wait for Archimonde to come, it'll be too late. Duque tried hard to recall this part of history that wasn't completely unrecognizable. It wasn't easy to stop Archimonde's attack. After Archimonde came ashore, the commander of the Burning Legion would fly into a rage and summon a large number of Apocalypse Guards, as well as the elites of the Scourge army. If they wanted to face Archimonde directly, they had to at least get rid of his lackeys to force him out. Thus, the most ideal situation was to set up defenses at Mount Hyjal, the home of the Night Elves, before Archimonde set foot on the Kalimdor continent. Suddenly, a silver magic lamp lit up on the highest floor of the Mage Tower, blinking. Jaina snapped her fingers, and Egwene's voice sounded. "Apologies for interrupting your reunion. A messenger from the Horde riding a wyvern just came to our northern sentry tower. He said that the Chief Sar wants to see you urgently, and hopes that you can go as soon as possible." Jaina and Duque looked at each other. "I'll be back soon." 10 minutes later, on the other side of Orgrimmar, a magic circle surrounded by orc guards began to glow. That was the magic formation that Sar had allowed Jaina to use when she needed an urgent visit. Brock, who had been waiting for a long time, was stunned when he saw Jaina appear on the magic formation with 2 female magician guards. He then said in broken common language, "Lady Jaina, follow me." Chapter 873. Sal was very worried. He did not know if he had made the right decision by asking Jaina to come. It was not a good thing for a young leader to show his weakness to an alliance that was once an enemy. Wajin gave Sal determination. "We have no choice. If the other party can easily destroy such a powerful clan in the Horde, they have the ability to destroy all of us, even Theramor's alliance advance force. The weak had to stick together." This was an unchanging law. After seeing Jaina, Sal's first words were, "The Warsong clan of the Horde is in a place called Grey Valley in the north. The entire clan, along with 5,000 workers, nearly 30,000 people, are missing." Jaina's face was full of shock. Although she did not personally experience the second battle of the Dark Portal, Jaina had been trained by someone who had thrown her into the Tirisful woodlands in a world of ice and snow. Jaina was very clear about how powerful the 20,000 Warsong tribe beastmen were. But the change in her eyes in the next moment betrayed her inner thoughts. Sal suddenly lost his voice. "You know what's in Grey Valley? Damn it. This orc is too smart, and his intuition is too amazing." Jaina spat disdainfully in her heart, but she could not show it. If she guessed correctly, this might be the opportunity that Duque had been waiting for. "Maybe I know. If you can, for the sake of the new common threat, please tell us." Jaina took a deep breath. "Do you know the High Elves?" Sal nodded. "I've heard of them from the former Chief Orgrim, and I've occasionally seen a few of them in Lordaeron." "Then do you know that the High Elves were actually exiled by their compatriots thousands of years ago, then crossed the Endless Sea to reach the Eastern Kingdom, and finally established their own kingdom in the northernmost part of the continent?" "You mean, the Night Elves? This is a tribe that only exists in the ancient legends of the High Elves. Even the High Elves themselves have not seen them for at least 7,000 years. In the entire alliance, we are not even sure if they still exist in the world. But if there is a force in the north of Kalimdor that can annihilate more than 30,000 orc elites in one go, I can only think of the Night Elves." Sal anxiously asked, "What are the characteristics of the Night Elves that you know?" Jaina glanced at Wajin, who was not far from Thrall. "Legend has it that the ancestors of the Night Elves were also trolls, so their characteristics should be more similar to forest trolls. However, when the Night Elves exiled the High Elves, the Night Elves were ruled by druids who advocated nature." "Oh no." Thrall's face turned pale. "I sent the Warsong clan to Grey Valley to cut down trees. If you don't court death, you'll die." There really was no limit to courting death. Duque only revealed the knowledge that Jaina needed, so Jaina couldn't know more. It was enough to tell the tribe that they had provoked an ancient and powerful race. Jaina still remembered what Duque said to her before he left, the Night Elves should exist. However, they were a race even more stubborn than the High Elves. They needed an opportunity to break through their self-imposed blockade. "Don't worry, we don't need to do anything. According to the characteristics of the tribe, they will definitely clash. Which of the high elves are the night elves more inclined toward? The rangers. However, their love for the forest is more extreme. Back to the present. After hearing Thrall say that he had sent the Warsong clan to Grey Valley to cut down trees, Jaina really laughed out loud. The night elves loved nature and regarded the forest as their life. If they met a tribe that insisted on cutting down trees to build houses, it would really be laughable. As Jaina expected, the Warsong clan was in huge trouble. Everything was fine at first. After entering Grey Valley, Warsong first carefully cut down trees on the periphery. However, Grom soon found that the trees on the periphery of the forest did not meet the requirements. They were too young. In a great city, the taller the better, the thicker the better, the stronger the giant wood. Without finding any danger, Grom waved his hand and divided the clan into 4 groups of 5,000 people. They surrounded the woodcutters and set off into the depths of the forest. After 2 days in the forest, they found the giant trees they wanted. However, in less than an hour, a nightmare came. It was a silent, swift arrow from the darkness of the forest. It was as dense as heavy rain, but as accurate as a poisonous snake. They aimed at the vulnerable eyeballs and unprotected throats of the orcs. The warriors of the tribe were never afraid of arrows from the front. Even when facing a dense array of arrows from the humans, they were confident that after a certain amount of sacrifice, they would be able to pull the battle into close combat. Not this time. The mysterious enemy used the essence of guerrilla warfare to the extreme. They attacked and ran, and all of them were killed in one shot. Before the orcs could rush over, the enemy would disappear into the forest like a ghost. Most of the time, entire squads would perish in battle without a sound or a trace. In just half a day, the Warsong clan was forced into a desperate situation. More than 10,000 Warsong warriors had fallen in the forest, and the 5,000 woodcutters were almost completely wiped out. Grom tried to lead his people out of this desperate situation, but the enemy was still relentless in their pursuit. Any shouts would be met with silence from the other side, replying with even sharper arrows. Grom despaired until he smelled a familiar scent, the scent of demon blood. Why would there be demon blood in the forest that he had not seen for 20 years? Grom's first thought was that this was a demon's plot. But did he have a choice? Drink. Perhaps he and his people still had a way out. Not drinking. It was total annihilation. Grom hell roared, his eyes bloodshot. Since you want me to die, then I'll kill you first. Grom led his clansmen and drank the devil's blood without hesitation. The earth-shattering roar echoed in the forest that had been silent for nearly 10,000 years in Grey Valley. The night elves besieging the orcs would never have imagined that the green-skinned creatures would suddenly become many times stronger in just an hour. What used to be a vital point was no longer a vital point. The throat that could be pierced with one arrow seemed to be covered by a thick layer of rhinoceros skin. The arrows that were shot at the eyeballs were all deflected away by the orcs' movements and reactions, which were much faster than the orcs. The fallen orcs' speed, strength, and agility far surpassed the night elves. They caught up to the night elves and killed them one by one. They cruelly dismembered their corpses and even chewed on their flesh. Finally, Grom saw the enemy's main character appear. It was a mysterious male with an elf's upper body and a stag's lower body. Chapter 874. On the other side, while Sal and Jaina were discussing the disappearance of the Warsong clan, new news came. Sal cried out, "What? Has the Warsong clan gone mad? Even attacking their own people without distinguishing between friend and foe? Like the old batch of orcs who drank the devil's blood?" In the face of a poison like demon blood that could make orcs crazy, Sal would rather hear about the Warsong clan's rebellion. It had been 20 years since Grom drank demon blood for the first time. Sal would always remember how violent and painful the old orc was when he saw the demon blood act up when he was young. When he received the news from the Warsong clan, Sal was very annoyed. The Horde didn't have magic communication. With Orgrimmar as the center, the Horde's forces were expanding to the barren lands. Now, the Horde had a vast but barren territory. The only thing that maintained such a large territory was the wyverns raised by the Frostwolf clan. There weren't many wyverns in the horde, which were large enough to carry orcs in flight. The only 30 or so were all used for communication. Even with the wyverns, there was still a delay in the transmission of information. Sal had no idea what was going on. Sorry, Princess Proudmoore. It seems that I have to leave today. After all, the Warsong clan is out of control. This is too serious for the horde, Sal said. Just as Jaina was about to say something, she received a shocking magical message. Duque's voice in the message was extremely urgent. Jaina, come back to Theramore immediately. Something big has happened to Kurtiras. Jaina's face turned pale. She threw a magic messaging crystal to Thrall and said, "This is a magic locator. When you're in an emergency, crush the shell of this thing. Hold the white bead inside and imagine the terrain around you. I should be rushing over to help you." With that, she didn't hesitate to activate the teleportation spell in front of Sal, turning herself into a stream of light and flying to the set coordinates in Theramore's space. When Jaina returned to Theramore and her vision was restored, she felt that something was wrong. Standing at the door of the teleportation hall, Duque's face was sullen. In her impression, Duque was always full of wisdom and foresight. It was as if the development of everything in the world could not escape his expectations. But now, Duque's face, which was a mixture of shock and bitterness, was clearly telling her that something unexpected had happened, and it was related to her. A sense of foreboding filled Gianna's chest. Duque. What happened? Duque didn't know what kind of expression he should use to face the anxious Jaina, nor did he know what kind of tone he should use to answer her questions. After taking a deep breath and remaining silent for 3 seconds, Duque said, "The first fleet of Tiras and Tiras were attacked one after another. His Majesty Daelin and His Highness Tandrid's family." Something happened. As if struck by lightning, Jaina's mind went blank. No. This is impossible, this can't be true. Gianna felt dizzy and almost fainted on the spot. Duque hurriedly held the limp Jaina in his arms. He could clearly feel that the body of this superheroine in history was no different from that of a weak woman who had gone through a drastic change. Gianna could only feel the heat in her body flowing wildly into some unknown hole. So cold. She almost subconsciously hugged Duque tightly. She needed the little warmth from that masculine body. Duque just sat on the ground and hugged Jaina quietly. How much time had passed? 1 minute? 5 minutes? Or a century? She didn't know. After a long time, Jaina finally regained her senses. Has the news been confirmed? Jaina raised her head in grief. Her once bright red lips had lost their color and were turning white. The remnants of the First Fleet have reached the shore. His Majesty Daelin is in Theramore. The world seemed to be collapsing. Jaina staggered and almost fell out of Duque's arms. Duque quickly put his arms around Jaina, who was as soft as mud, and hugged her again. After an unknown amount of time, Jaina regained her strength. Help me. Duque silently did as he was told. Sure enough, Jaina in this life had not experienced the battle to eliminate the plague with Arthas. She went straight to Theramore. Her experience was lacking, and her mentality was not as calm. Just like that, Duque helped Jaina out of the lowest floor of the Mage Tower. Surrounded by a group of guards, they arrived at the newly built medium-sized church in Theramore. Through the open door. What did Jaina see? Her father, who she had cursed countless times but was like an unkillable cockroach, who had miraculously survived time and time again at sea, was lying coldly on the altar in the middle of the church. His lower body was covered with the flag of Tiras. He was so quiet, a far cry from the father who always spoke in a loud and gruff voice in her memory. He had deliberately alienated her because of the royal power, treated her indifferently, and exiled her in disguise. All the accumulated resentment disappeared at this moment. Jaina struggled to leave Duque's support and threw herself on the altar. She touched her father's body with trembling hands. Sparkling tears fell, dripping onto the flag of Kultiras, and blossomed into blossoms. For a long time. For a long time. Jaina's shoulders stopped trembling. Father. How did he die? It's Archimonde. A female voice interrupted. It was only at this moment that Jaina noticed that the woman she had once found an eyesore and hated, her father's lover, Jaina Goldsword, was sitting not far away. Jaina bit her lip hard, and red blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. Continue. A week ago, Daylin and I, along with Kultira's first fleet, were on the opposite side of the North Stream coast. It was about 500 nautical miles away, and we were cleaning up the ghost ships floating on the sea full of undead. Then Archimonde suddenly appeared from the bottom of the sea. There were no signs at all. He was like a mountain rising from the bottom of the sea, and he directly cut the entire B squadron in half. Jaina Goldsword's face was also filled with unconcealable sorrow. As she spoke, there was even a priest treating a terrible wound on her abdomen. Daylin tried to rush over and delay Archimonde so that more people could escape, but Archimonde just pointed his finger, and a black light shot out from his hand and hit Daylin. What were you doing? Jaina was furious. Duque stopped her and shook his head. Chapter 875. Lady Goldensword has done her best. Miraculously, Duque's words appeased Jaina, who was about to go berserk. Jaina was silent, but her tears flowed down her face like a dam that had collapsed. Jaina Goldensword continued, Archimonde seemed to be venting. After destroying every living creature in his field of vision, he sank to the bottom of the sea again. He may have gone west, or south. When I woke up, it was the second squadron of the first fleet that saved me. Next, it was another General Kultiras who narrated. For some reason, Kultiras had also been attacked. However, this time it was not the Scourge, but tens of thousands of powerful Naga. Unlike the Naga under Duque, this batch of Naga was ink black in color. Their eyes are blood red, just like those berserk orcs. The survivors seem to have heard that the leader of the Naga was called Vasht. Vasht? Duque blurted out. You know. Jaina grabbed Duque's sleeve almost instantly. Duque smiled bitterly, that's an even more powerful Naga clan in the depths of the endless sea. The Furious Scale clan under me can't even compare to the patrols of the Vasht clan. Jaina did not speak, but she deeply imprinted the name Vasht in her heart. The general continued, the island of Kultiras has been destroyed. His Highness Thenred led the Imperial Guards to launch a desperate charge against Vasht, but was shot to death on the dock on the spot. Many survivors saw it, and the young Highness ship was destroyed. No one would have thought that Kultiras would be destroyed almost overnight, and the main bloodline would be wiped out. Jaina Goldensword gritted her teeth, Kultiras has been destroyed, but Kultiras is not the first country to be destroyed, and it will probably not be the last. Your Highness Jaina Proudmoore, the heavy responsibility of restoring the country now falls on your shoulders. Your Highness, please ascend the throne as soon as possible and restore Kultiras. In response to her words, the civil and military officials of Kultiras all knelt down. Your Highness Jaina Proudmoore, please ascend the throne. Jaina was silent for a good 5 seconds. She glanced at Duque and wiped the tears off her face. Enthronement? I will. This is my responsibility as Proudmoore's son. But now, please leave. I want to be alone with my father. Observing a moment of silence for the ancestors was the right thing to do. A group of generals filed out. Just as Duque was about to step out of the church, Jaina's voice floated from behind him. Duque, give me some time. Maybe 1 or 2 days. I'll leave Theramore and the tribe to you. After saying that, a magic transmitter was tossed into Duque's hand. This was the communicator given to Sal. Duque said solemnly, leave it to me. Closing the door, Duque raised his head and looked at the clear sky. There was a trace of melancholy in his heart. The thread of fate had clearly seemed to have returned, but something like this happened at a time when he didn't expect it to. He didn't know if fate had been messed up by him, or if fate itself didn't listen to him and changed the direction of the future. In his memory, although Prince Tandred wasn't very capable, after Dalen's death, he managed the half-dead Kul Tiras with fear and trepidation. He should have lived for a few decades. But now, Tandred was dead. Jaina, who had been the uncrowned queen of Theramore, had been homeless for the rest of her life. But now, she was about to become the queen of Kul Tiras. It could only be said that fate was a strange thing. Duque suddenly realized that if he blindly looked at the future according to the original history, he would probably fail miserably. It seemed like there was no need to wait for the tribe to die. The death of a king was definitely a major event. Jaina could immerse herself in sorrow, but Duque couldn't. Time passed quickly as the fleet was reorganized and the wounded were treated. The next morning, the communicator that was given to Sal suddenly began to flash red. Duque gently clenched it, and an extremely clear spatial coordinate appeared in Duque's mind. Something happened to Sal. In Grey Valley, Wajin and Sal stayed together. Sal held the communicator in his wide palm. Sal said in a deep voice, "Wajin, I still don't think it's a good idea to attract humans. We have never been allies with the Alliance, not in the past, and it will be difficult to be in the future. I don't think humans will face this crisis with us. Jaina's group might choose to give up Theramore and go a little further south." Wajin sighed. He touched his long troll fangs. "We have no choice. I don't have high hopes for that Jaina. Although she is a smart person, I always feel that she has a faint hostility towards our tribe. Of course, most alliances are like this. So, if we want to cooperate, we must find someone with greater wisdom." At this moment, Sal suddenly found that the space not far from him began to fluctuate violently. "Get out of the way." Varrock waved his hand, dispersing the nearby orc guards. "Be careful, it's not Jaina." Wajin could see at a glance that the level of spatial fluctuations was on a completely different level. Sal nervously clenched the hammer of destruction in his hand. At the same time, Rexer beside him also clenched his twin axes. In the next second, a figure that Sal and Rexer were very familiar with appeared in front of them. Seeing Sal's expression, Wajin subconsciously felt that things seemed to be a little delicate. "Why is it you?" Sal murmured. "Why can't it be me?" Duque said calmly. "Really? That's how I should say it, I'm really flattered." Sal immediately smiled bitterly. "He is." Wajin was puzzled. The Alliance's supreme leader, the Alliance's commander-in-chief, Duke Marcus. Rexer said, enunciating each word. Wajin was greatly surprised. Duque actually came in person. Why is this happening? The Alliance has suffered a heavy blow again. Not long ago, His Majesty Dalen Proudmoore passed away. Her Highness Jaina has to deal with the aftermath. It seemed like a light sentence, but it did not make Sal feel happy because of the damage the Alliance had suffered. Instead, it made Sal's heart even more heavy. That powerful alliance, the alliance that defeated the previously incomparably powerful tribes, actually collapsed to this point. Even a monster like Duque could not stop the collapse of the situation. How terrifying was the Scourge army? Sal's heart trembled. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.